Nor do I. Then she said, therefore, I urge you to do the right thing for the country and the party and set a timetable for an orderly transition so that a new team can deliver the change we promised the country. Now, the Cabinet have been arriving, some of them smiling, nobody saying anything. People who looked particularly glum, though, I thought, were the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, especially. Many in the party very angry with him. They feel that his fingerprints are all over this because he's now in pole position to run for the leadership. But I spoke to one of his team in the last hour or two, and they said that's absolutely unfair. He said there's lots of people wanting the Prime Minister's job, that Wes Streeting hasn't asked anybody to go over the top for him. But at the least, he is being honest and saying that he's ready to mount a challenge if the Prime Minister can't stay.
Well, welcome to Britain's Newsroom. What an extraordinary day. We're asking, is it the end game for the Prime Minister?
We're saying Keir Starmer could be forced to announce he's stepping down as early as today. Cabinet was meeting. We will be there right through the meeting this morning. The Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, is among 3 Cabinet Ministers, has already said he's got to announce a timetable for his resignation. 80 Labour MPs have now joined the mutiny.
Well, can he hang on, Andrew? And this time yesterday, we were about to listen to his reset speech.
Which was terrible.
It was not enough, and one of the papers commenting today that he was using his least effective method to try and save himself. He's not known for his speeches. Yesterday was nothing special. It
was tired, it was full of cliches, he's not an orator, and the big announcement that he was going to nationalise British Steel, full stop, subject to a public interest test. Come on, man, make a decision. Absolutely. For once. Get on with it.
And it's the parallels with the last days of Boris Johnson are just extraordinary, because it's exactly how the Conservatives did. Labour are bypassing the standard way of getting rid of leaders and trying to force challenges and just resigning en masse, and that's enough.
And this is historic for Labour, because this has never happened to a serving Labour Prime Minister ever. Well, certainly post-war.
No, and one who won such an extraordinary majority just, well, less than 2 years ago.
1 year and 10 months ago, he was walking on water, wasn't he?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure he was ever in the positive popularity ratings, but nevertheless...
But he had a majority the same size as Tony Blair, so he could do with that majority what he wanted. Let's go to our political correspondent, Catherine Forster, Chief Political Correspondent Catherine Forster, who's in Downing Street as this extraordinary Cabinet meeting takes place. Catherine, normally they would be talking about the King's speech, which is tomorrow, a major event in the political calendar, but I suspect at the moment they're talking about, can he survive?
That he can lead the change, but she is saying she doesn't believe...
Yes, I suspect so too. Good morning from Downing Street. It is quite surreal here. The roads are all closed, getting ready for the King's speech. I came in at 5:30. There was a marching band practising for that, but it's possible that the legislative agenda that the King outlines tomorrow may quickly become obsolete, depending on what happens in that building behind me, where the Cabinet are now meeting. Now, in the last few minutes, we've heard that 81 MPs have publicly now called for the Prime Minister to go. That is 1/5 of the Parliamentary Labour Party. That is symbolically very important. That is the number needed for a challenge. The problem is, of course, that there is no agreement on who the best person is to replace the Prime Minister. Now, as the Cabinet arrived, some were smiling. They were all very tight-lipped. One person that I thought was particularly gloomy looking was Wes Streeting. He is the Health Secretary. We know he'd dearly love to be Prime Minister. He's made no secret of that. But there's many in Labour very angry with him, feeling that his fingerprints are all over this, and that the plan is for him to move, while Andy Burnham, who is the most popular Labour politician in the country, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, still doesn't have a seat and therefore not in the running at the moment. Now, I was talking to an ally of Wes Streeting this morning who said that this was totally unfair, that Wes Streeting hasn't asked anybody to go over the top for him. But he said, look, at least Wes Streeting has been honest. He has said to the Prime Minister he will not move against him. But if the Prime Minister's position is untenable, he's ready to go. But look, we don't know what the Prime Minister will decide. We know that Shabana Mahmood last night called for him to set out a timetable for departure. We know that others like Lord Hermer, like Steve Reed, said absolutely you shouldn't go anywhere. Darren Jones, a key ally of the Prime Minister, this morning on the broadcast round, saying that he couldn't get ahead of any decision that the Prime Minister might make, but also saying that he felt that the majority of ministers wanted the Prime Minister to stay. Why might that be? Well, look at the markets, the FTSE plunging, gilt yields going up, as Paul Johnson of the IFS have said, borrowing getting more expensive. Markets do not like instability, and as Sir Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves will argue, we're already in a difficult world, a dangerous world. The Strait of Hormuz is closed, our bills are rocketing, that's going to get much worse. There's war in Ukraine. Is this really the time to change leader? I have talked to people in Number 10 who feel incredibly sad, who say, look, the Prime Minister is a decent man, but it feels like the herd is moving. Also, Labour MPs who just feel that this is frankly mad. Nobody knows what comes next. Andy Burnham maybe doesn't have time. Angela Rayner, she still owes £40,000 in stamp duty. We hear that investigation still going on. Ed Miliband, he apparently didn't want the job, but maybe if it's Wes Streeting or somebody else, he might throw his hat into the ring. We don't know where this goes, and for all the talk of an orderly transition, there is no agreement on what might happen next.
An easy time for a Prime Minister to resign or be forced out, but with the King's speech tomorrow, whatever Starmer says today has the potential to cause extraordinary chaos and even potentially a constitutional crisis. Do you think Labour MPs are aware of the timings here and what it might mean for the government's legislative programme?
And his MPs revolted, and in fact that is one of the main issues that
I think the Labour Party is having a collective nervous breakdown at this point. They are absolutely in civil war. I mean, we saw Catherine West, that backbench MP, the other day saying if the Cabinet don't move against him, I will. She later softened that but invited people to send their names in. She said she wanted a transition in September. Then she went, oh, that was a typo, I meant by September. She said that she hadn't looked at the rules. It feels like a lot of people have obviously taken those catastrophic election losses very personally, are worried about losing their seats and are just thinking we have to get rid of the Prime Minister and we have to do it now. The trouble is, look before you leap. We don't know what follows. Nobody knows what follows. And the Prime Minister, well, let's see. I mean, he was adamant yesterday that he wasn't going anywhere, that he's not going to plunge the country into chaos, but it feels like the chaos is already here, and it feels like a very long time, and it's only 2 years since Labour campaigned. I looked up what the now Prime Minister said at the beginning of the general election campaign, and he said we will stop the chaos, that they will bring stability, country first, party second. They also promised growth. They also promised very limited tax rises, but hey, times have changed.
And Catherine, you know, the strategy in Number 10, I just despaired of it ever since Starmer's got in. Who thought it was a good idea to brief over the weekend that Starmer was going to make a make-or-break speech which would save his premiership? He's incapable of delivering a magisterial speech. It's not what he's good at. He's not an orator. It was policy light, which was extraordinary. And the one area he took us to, which is what I predicted they would do last Friday, take us closer to the European Union, coming just days after local election results where seats which voted massively for Brexit overwhelmingly rejected Labour and voted for reform. The entire strategy around yesterday was wrong, as per usual. Who is running Number 10?
I think one thing worth remembering is that the process in the Labour Party is different.
Well, that's a good question, and the answer is there's been a succession of people running Number 10. We've had several chiefs of staff, we've had many head of comms. The churn has been quite incredible because things go badly and somebody is thrown under the bus, and so it goes on and so forth. But I was at that speech yesterday. Yes, it was underwhelming. To be honest, I didn't expect it was going to shift the dial because the Prime Minister is not a natural natural orator. I thought he sounded more passionate in places, but what did we learn? British Steel was being nationalised. We're edging towards that already. Apprenticeships, well, yeah, we hear about that, but where are they really? And the whole key message, which is more Europe. I mean, I asked the Prime Minister whether Labour had abandoned the working class, because clearly the working class communities that were the core of the Labour vote in the Red Wall, in Wales, in Scotland, feel that they have been abandoned by the Labour Party, and that the Prime Minister doesn't get it. I asked him that directly. It was a question about the Labour Party and the working class. He answered, well, an entirely different question that I hadn't asked. He talked about Brexit. He talked about Nigel Farage. But the point is that working class communities, much of the country has been struggling for a very long time, dating back to the financial crisis and before. That's why so many of them voted for Brexit. So for all the difficulties that Brexit may have brought, and many people will say, well, it hasn't been done properly, we've not taken the opportunities. These communities were left behind long before we left the European Union. Brexit is not the cause of all our ills.
Catherine Forster outside number 10, keeping watch on the movements in Downing Street.
And we will also have our eyes and our ears not far from the Cabinet, really, because it will leak like a sieve, you could be quite certain. We're going to talk now to Carl Turner, who is the MP for Kingston-upon-Hull East. He had the Labour whip suspended because of his principled stance, I would say, on opposing Labour's plans to dilute trials by jury. Mr Turner, good morning to you. It's fair to say, have been saying for some time, Keir Starmer is in peril and probably not up to the job. What should happen now? A timetable for his departure, or should he just go?
Well, when I was watching this just a few minutes ago, I was reminded by Boris Johnson saying, when the herd moves, the herd moves. What's happened, Andrew, is the herd is stampeding. So the prospect of Keir Starmer staying very long at all in Downing Street is rather remote, in my view. The reality is he must set a timetable, I think, because unless we have some semblance of stability, the markets will wobble. And that is a problem that we need to avoid, in my view. I think we'll do it anyway, frankly, but I think we need to have a timetable where he sets a date and then we move towards that date.
But we have paralysis then, don't we? Because we've got a lame duck Prime Minister. The timetable, what would it be, September, October, around the time of the party conference, so you can have a proper, orderly leadership contest, Mr Turner, whereby Andy Burnham could possibly even take part in it. If it was a quick departure and a quick leadership contest, the king across the water, Burnham doesn't get a look in.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I'm not convinced that there's any prospect of Andy Burnham in any event, Andrew, if I'm honest. I mean, this idea that the national executive of the party, 6 months on from saying you're not coming in, are going to say, well, actually, now we have the evidence that it's going to be unlikely that we hold on to the mayoralty in Greater Manchester, and it's unlikely that you can win a seat. We're now going to change our mind and say, well, at the time of saying it, we had our fingers crossed, but we've had a think now, and you can be the candidate for wherever. I think that's probably unlikely, in my opinion. So the Parliamentary Labour Party have a choice to make. Do they want West Streeting? Do they want Angie Rayner? Or do they possibly want Ed Miliband? That's where we are, I think.
Just about those personalities, though, is it? It's about the factions and the politics that they represent. And the New Statesman this morning, of course, the journal of the Labour Party, is leading with the headline, "Is Labour about to descend into civil war?" If we do see a leadership campaign, we're going to see all these arguments out in the open, and it's unclear how they will be resolved. Do you think this is possibly the end of the Labour Party?
Well, if you were knocking on doors with me last week, you'd have thought that the Labour Party had already died, frankly, because people were saying things that I've never, in the 40 years of being involved in the Labour movement, ever heard. And the tragedy was, it was all about Keir Starmer. It is a vitriolic, toxic. We had our problems with Jeremy Corbyn. But the vitriol for Keir Starmer on the doorstep was much worse than I'd ever heard about Jeremy Corbyn. And remember, Andrew will remember this, I suspect, I was not a fan of Jeremy Corbyn. Far from it. I resigned as his Shadow Attorney General. But honestly, there was parts of my constituency who begrudgingly respected Corbyn. The constituency now despises Keir Starmer. So we have a massive hill to climb. What we need to do is get a leader in place who can disassociate from what's gone in the last 2 years. I don't think it's all Keir Starmer's fault, frankly. But what I would say is this. When you go to the country, as we did in July 2024, promising to do away with the incompetence and chaos of the previous Conservative governments, and promise to be holier than thou, and then as soon as you're in, start to mess around with more chaos, the U-turning, the policy decisions which were never pitch-rolled with the PLP, the winter fuel stuff, leaving everybody to think that their granny was going to have the winter fuel allowance taken from them, a Labour policy, incidentally, under Gordon Brown, snatched away from them without mentioning it to the Parliamentary Labour Party. And that continued on and on and on and on until we got to the jury trial stuff. And I went into the chief whip at the time. I said, this is the line for me. I can't do this. I can't possibly bring myself to agree to this ludicrous policy when the former Tory government had every reason to do away with jury trials in the pandemic, yet resisted it because they knew it was undemocratic, it was unpopular, it was unworkable. And at that point, I realised there was no way that this government was going to carry on in any way like a success.
What you say about the deep unpopularity of Keir Starmer, and certainly the polls reflect that, and many of our viewers will absolutely agree with what you're saying about jury trials. But nevertheless, it seems unclear what replacing Starmer will achieve, because many people, many economists' diagnosis of the major problems facing our country, the fact that we think of ourselves as rich and we're not, we need massive cuts in public spending, none of those are going to be solved by the Labour Party, because whoever is in charge of the Labour Party, the backbenchers are not going to vote for the kind of economic reforms that we need to save the country. So what's the point in losing Keir Starmer?
Well, that's an argument that's been made by some MPs as well, not just you. They say, let's hold on to Keir Starmer, but we know the longer we go on with the current Prime Minister, the more unlikely it is for us to mend with the electorate. And that's what we've got to try to do. It might not work. I'm not suggesting a new leader is going to waltz in and magic up some popularity for the Labour Party. But what I'm saying is there's a possibility of moving on from what is clearly a complete and utter chaotic debacle of a scenario which Keir Starmer promised to put to bed when he became the Prime Minister. We can't carry on like this. We need to act in the country's interest, which is what the Prime Minister promised. But I don't think there's any prospects of whoever comes in calling a very early snap election. Why would they when we've got a big majority? Of course, I was one of the MPs who was very vocal. Every time the Tories lost a leader, I was screaming and bawling, saying, let's have a general election, you've no mandate. But the reality is, that never happens in government. It never happens. Because why would they go to the country knowing they're going to lose? They need to get a grip of what's going on and try to mend our ways and give the country some confidence that whoever is in charge at number 10 is doing the best for the country.
Just before we let you go, Mr. Turner, there's the King's speech tomorrow. The King is going to talk about my government will do this, my government will do that. It's going to put him in a very difficult position when the government's head, the Prime Minister, it looks like he's going to have to announce a timetable for his departure, meaning we'll probably have another King's speech in a few months' time. It's a very badly organised coup, isn't it?
It is shockingly badly organised. And the reality is, of course, it causes embarrassment. Every single member of Parliament, including some on the Labour benches, is going to be speaking to the King's Speech for the next 5 days after it's announced by the King tomorrow, saying this is not really the programme for government of the Prime Minister of the day. So we need a new... It's just going to be a mess. It's terribly embarrassing, not just for the Labour Party, but for politics and for government. And we wonder why people are cheesed off with politics and politicians. I'm ashamed of it. I think most Labour MPs will be ashamed of where we've got to. And I'm afraid it pains me because he was a good pal of mine, the Prime Minister. But it pains me to say the management of the Labour Party in government, which Keir Starmer has been in charge of, has gone into this terrible state as a result of the way he's managed things. It's been shocking.
All right, Carl Turner, thank you for being so frank. He is the MP for Kingston upon Hull East. He was a Labour MP until he had the temerity to say it was outrageous to try and restrict jury trials. Now, another MP has urged to come to... I think we're up to 81 or 82 now, Miriam, aren't we?
So another Labour MP, Paul Foster, who is the MP for South Ribble in Lancashire, has urged the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, to quit. That's in the last few moments. He's now the 82nd
but
MP.
Significantly, a junior minister has resigned, and when one starts, there'll be more if he doesn't announce that timetable, in my view.
Well, I think we've got to... OK, so in the Prime Minister's fight-back speech yesterday, he made a particular announcement. Let's have a listen.
So I can announce that legislation will be brought forward this week to give the government powers, subject to that public interest test, to take full national ownership of British Steel.
So, got some breaking news. The Prime Minister... What is the breaking news?
No, I think this is the... Today is the breaking news, Andrew. Everything's up to 82 MPs.
But the Prime Minister announces that he's going to nationalise British Steel, but then added the caveat, subject to a public interest test. We can't even make a proper decision on that as well. Typical Starmer. We have got the contributor of The Critic, Chris Bayliss, who is an energy expert, joins us now. Is it in the public interest to nationalise British Steel?
Well,
shouldn't the Prime Minister know?
I think the thing that we have to remember is that the entire situation of the steel sector is almost entirely downwind of policy. If you look at the carbon price, energy prices, it adds altogether in the round, it adds between $80 and $200 per tonne of steel produced. Now, if you consider that the Chinese are knocking steel out for less than $500 a tonne in total, that's an enormous percentage of the cost. And this was intended. The purpose of this was to deter people from doing anything that emitted carbon dioxide. And you need to. It's about 2 tonnes of carbon emitted for every tonne of steel produced. The point was that people would stop doing things like this, like making steel. And now we find ourselves with the consequences. And I think that if the government are going to impose costs like that, well, why shouldn't it sit on the Treasury's books? If the government actually found themselves on the receiving end of these costs, perhaps they'd think about it a little bit more clearly. So while many of us might not be in favour of nationalisation in general, I think, and this is a subject that at The Critic we've been thinking about a lot lately. Christopher Snowden wrote a brilliant article last week about this, that we think about nationalisation and privatisation from the 1940s, privatisations in the 80s, after nationalisations earlier, and we think in terms of that dichotomy. I think the argument now is that that's an outdated way of thinking about things. We've got this system that's basically capitalist for the most part. These industries are generally owned by private owners. But in terms of the actual who makes the decisions, who allocates resources, so much of that is now done by government policy, whether it's regulations, whether it's obligations, whether it's taxes, whether it's levies. The decisions are made in government and they pass it down to the private sector and say, you guys figure this out and make it happen, and if you can't, then you don't have a business. So we've got a system that's basically capitalist, but it's not free market in any way. And we're now dealing with the consequences of this. So.
Well, isn't it taking the worst of of free market capitalism in that we have no barriers really to speak of to stop countries like China, for example, that overproduce steel from dumping it in countries like ours, driving down the price and then making it even less profitable to produce here. And haven't we got kind of caught between two ideologies, one of free trade and one of net zero, which has obviously pushed up the energy price?
Yeah, effectively. And the government previously was talking about these tariffs that they're imposing, and the idea, if you look at the start of this century, 26 years ago, this country was producing about 15 million tonnes of steel annually. That got down to, it was about 5.5 million in 2023, 4 million in 2024. Now, I haven't seen complete data yet for 2025, but there's some rumours that that's probably about 2.5 million tonnes. It is a fraction of what we used to do. And this is the consequence of, and it's quite deliberate that we chose to have a different type of economy that didn't do these dirty things. And now we find ourselves up against, and they're claiming that, so the country, I think it's about, we use about 8 or 9 million tonnes of steel annually in this country. The idea was that we'd be producing half of that domestically. Well, that is going to mean either we're producing a lot more than we are today, or we use less, if you think about it. It could potentially mean either of those two things. But in any case, sticking a tariff on a 50% above the quota, that is going to increase the cost of steel to people that are using it. And that is either that means that we're producing more of it here, or it means that we're using less of it, which will see fewer projects, fewer things happening, and fewer things being made in this country.
Who's going to decide if this is in the public interest? Who decides that? I mean, we may not have the same Prime Minister to order that review, but who would make the decision?
Presumably some impeccably credentialed committee of civil servants who know what's in the best interests of everybody else.
Now, the first time steel was nationalised, I think in 1967, it didn't bode well for the steel industry. Of course, we had a lot of downturn during the 1970s. Do you think there's any realistic chance that nationalisation could see a revival of our steel industry?
I mean, it might potentially mean that we retain some capacity. I think that if the government doesn't intervene at this point, we won't have a crude steel industry. So there's two ways of making steel. Either you recycle it using an electric arc furnace, or you make it originally using a blast furnace, which is an incredibly BOF type furnace, which is incredibly energy intensive and cannot be done using electricity. It uses some electricity, but it's mainly coal, which, given the policy environment of the UK at the moment, the private sector is not going to do that competitively. The Chinese came in, Jingye Steel came in and acquired these facilities thinking that having some toehold in the UK would accrue them some advantage. Well, they've learned that lesson. The idea, and this has all been announced, by the way, we knew that nationalisation was coming down the tracks. It's been announced to give a bit of a boost because it sounds kind of laboury. We knew that this was coming down. Either they do something or it goes.
Or it collapses.
It's as simple as that.
Chris Bayliss, for now, thank you very much. We're going to move back to our political correspondent, Catherine Forster. She's in Downing Street because she has some news. The Prime Minister apparently has told Cabinet he's staying put.
I thought he would.
Yes, well, welcome to Downing Street. The Cabinet meeting behind me, an absolutely critical meeting for the Prime Minister, but some words have been briefed out to us to the effect that the Prime Minister says he's going nowhere. So apparently he will be telling the meeting, as I said yesterday, I take responsibility for these election results and I take responsibility for delivering the change that we promised. The past 48 hours have been destabilising for government, and that has a real economic cost for our country and for families. The Labour Party has a process for challenging a leader, and that has not been triggered. The country expects us to get on with governing. That is what I am doing and what we must do as a cabinet. So that is the message from the Prime Minister to the Cabinet. Will they listen? We know that Shabana Mahmood and some others have asked for him to set out a timetable to leave, but we know that others, Steve Reed, the Housing Secretary, Lord Hermer, the Attorney General, David Lammy, the Justice Secretary, are saying, no, you mustn't go, you need to stand firm. And of course, the Prime Minister is saying he doesn't want to go because he doesn't want to plunge the country into chaos. chaos, and we're already seeing some chaos because the financial markets have opened, the stock market is down, bond yields are up, as Paul Johnson, that used to run the IFS, said. Borrowing has got more expensive for all of us, and that is very depressing. This is all coming at a time where the economy is not in a good place, where the war in Iran is sending our bills rocketing. That situation is likely to get dramatically worse in the coming months, even if the Strait of Hormuz is reopened, which is not going to happen anytime soon. Let's face it. There's a war in Ukraine. There's global instability. We're living in a dangerous world. The Prime Minister's argument is we need stability. This is not the time to indulge in a civil war. But look, we've also hit that symbolic threshold of 81 Labour MPs openly calling for the Prime Minister to go. That is 1/5 of the Parliamentary Labour Party. So I think that is significant. But then again, it hasn't actually triggered a contest yet. Will somebody in that building behind me decide to start that contest? Wes Streeting, lots of colleagues very cross with him. They think that he's behind this, but his allies telling me this morning he's absolutely not asked anybody to go over the top at all. But he's one of many people, of course, that would like the Prime Minister's job.
Catherine Forster, Chief Political Correspondent, thank you very much for that report outside number 10. Going, but not quite gone. The Prime Minister tells his cabinet, I'm not going anywhere, as government ministers are failing to trigger a leadership challenge.
The Prime Minister saying he's not going anywhere, but in the end, it might be a decision that is taken from him.
And could it be taken from him by the people who are preparing to return to the building behind me? Ultimately, it is within the power of MPs to launch a formal leadership contest.
Successor scramble, contenders for the top job emerge, but there's no clear front runner. We'll have the latest. Also,
unions are backing the plan to...
So I can announce that legislation will be brought forward this week to give the government powers, subject to that public interest test, to take full national ownership of British Steel.
And the trade unions are weighing in on this, saying they back the plan to save Scunthorpe Steelworks, something Nigel Farage, leader of Reform UK, called for in April last year.
There has to be an immediate nationalisation of this plant, an immediate nationalisation of primary steel production in Britain.
Well, sound the alarm. We're here at British Steel here in Scunthorpe after Prime Minister Keir Starmer made that announcement yesterday in a bid to save his position that British Steel may be nationalised. We've spoken to the leader of North Lincolnshire Council. We'll get his views later on in the show.
I can hardly hear you. So we're asking, is it the end game for the Prime Minister?
He could be forced to announce a decision or a timeline to step down as late as early as today. But that depends on whether cabinet ministers resign, because he says, he's told the cabinet, he's not going anywhere.
Well, reportedly, Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood was among 3 cabinet members last night urging Sir Keir Starmer to resign, with over 80 Labour MPs now joining the growing mutiny. So we're asking, can he hang on? Interesting
And we're
development.
also asking our viewers and listeners, do you want him to hang on? Because what comes next?
Indeed.
Would that be far worse?
The great unknown. Interesting that he is reported to have told the cabinet he's not going anywhere.
I've said a long time, Miriam, I think he's not going to go, and he's going to have to be dragged out of that building. He is, as I said before, only the 4th Labour leader to win a general election. He's got his place in history, and he does not want to be the shortest-serving Labour Prime Minister since the war, which he would be, 1 year and 10 months. And he can say to the cabinet, OK, who would you want to take over? Who's the successor? There's no Gordon Brown, as there was with Tony Blair.
Yeah.
When Theresa May went, it was obvious it was going to be Boris Johnson.
It could be an astute move because now the Parliamentary Labour Party will have to trigger the formal process of challenging him, which means anybody who wants to stand against him has to get this magic 81 names on their nominations. That means each individual candidate has to get 81. They may find nobody is able to do that, or at least only one or two people. So perhaps it's a good move.
Wes Streeting talks the talk, but has he got 81 names? Possibly not. Even if he has, would he win the party in the country? I don't think he could. Does it mean Ed Miliband throws his hat in the ring? Angela Rayner? But what about the so-called King of the North, Andy Burnham? He hasn't got a seat. It would take, even if there was a by-election, it takes weeks to organise a by-election.
Exactly. And so anybody on the so-called soft left will be disincentivised from trying to gain those 81 names, because if they preempt a leadership contest now, there isn't time for Andy Burnham to get back. So it's open to the right, Wes Streeting, Shabana Mahmood, but will they get enough nominations because they know they're not so popular amongst the members?
Let's go back to our political correspondent, chief political correspondent, Catherine Forster, who's in Downing Street. And this extraordinary morning, Catherine, he is defying the herd. With the herd, as Carl Turner said to us, isn't just on the move, it's stampeding. But he's defying the herd. He says he's staying.
Well, yes, when the herd moves, it moves, as Boris Johnson said. The herd is moving, but at the moment, the Prime Minister is standing there and saying, I am not going anywhere. So we've had some words brief that he has told his cabinet, saying that he takes responsibility for delivering the change that was promised, and saying that the last 48 hours have been destabilising for the government and that it has an economic cost for our country and for families. We've seen that already when the markets opened this morning. The cost of borrowing is gone even higher. The stock market is falling. Markets do not like instability, and our economic position is already pretty bleak at the moment. So I think everything hangs now on what happens in the cabinet meeting taking place right now. We've got 81 MPs now have publicly called for the Prime Minister to go. That's a fifth of the Parliamentary Labour Party. That is significant because that's the number needed for a challenge. But the thing is, there is no unity around who is the right person to take the Prime Minister's place. We've also got the fact that the King's speech is tomorrow. We've got troops parading at 5:30 in the morning. The King going to set out a government's legislative agenda. Is this really the time to push a Prime Minister out now? I think a lot will hang on what is said in the meeting and how many of the Cabinet say that they think he has to go. We know that Shabana Mahmood has said that. We know that Ed Miliband has previously said that. But we know that others like Lord Hermer, like David Lammy, like Steve Reid are saying you should hang on. Darren Jones, he's one of the PM's key allies, on broadcast this morning, he was saying, I can't get ahead of any decision that he might make, but he also said that he felt that the majority of ministers were still behind the Prime Minister. So, frankly, I've got no idea what happens now, but nor does anybody else, not even the Prime Minister. I mean, he might decide to resign, but if he doesn't, we don't know what happens. It feels like it is when, not if, he goes. But if and when he does go, we've got no idea who might replace him. Andy Burnham, the favourite, he doesn't have a seat. Angela Rayner still owes, we hear, £40,000 in stamp duty. There's still an investigation going on. Ed Miliband, well, apparently he didn't want it, but he might have a rethink. We don't know where this ends, and this all comes at a time of great geopolitical uncertainty, economic instability. Who knows where we will be by the end of today.
Catherine Forster, our chief political correspondent, thank you so much for that report. We're going to move now to our deputy political editor, Tom Harwood. I think he's in College Green, near the Houses of Parliament. Right in the thick of it today, Tom. What a day. And as Catherine says, what happens next?
Well, exactly. This is such a difficult moment for the Prime Minister. It's worth restating the fact that no one in the Prime Minister's operation expected or hoped for getting to the point where we have reached today. More than 80 Labour MPs calling for the Prime Minister to go. Parliamentary private secretaries resigning. One minister resigning. Everyone asking the question, who is next? When is this train going to... Where is it going to go next? Who is going to go next? And frankly, this is all in the context of a time when politics is in flux anyway. You might be able to see behind me the fencing that has been started to be put up ahead of the King's visit to Parliament tomorrow. The King's speech, the opening of a new session of Parliament. All of that rigmarole is being delivered tomorrow, and yet in the midst of it all, we have this putative contest. Now, when the Prime Minister decided to host the King's speech this week, people thought that it could have been a clever ploy from the Prime Minister to keep MPs away from Westminster over the course of the immediate aftermath of the local elections, only formally coming back to Westminster tomorrow for the state opening. And yet, what happened while members of Parliament were away in their constituencies over that long weekend? Well, clearly, members of Parliament have been speaking to their constituents. They've been speaking to those councillors who lost their seats. They've been ruminating over the results of that series of local elections and indeed national elections in Scotland and Wales. They've been able to speak to real people outside of the Westminster village where I'm standing now, but real people up and down the country, and hear what they have had to say about the Prime Minister. Could it be that the Prime Minister's ploy has actually backfired? That his idea of keeping members of Parliament away from the corridors of power where they're known to plot and sulk, instead they've been speaking to real people out there in the country, and has that actually precipitated this enormous wave of discontent within Parliament? Members of Parliament, far more than the Prime Minister's team will have expected, have now called for him to go. But crucially, what happens next is the question. This could all move incredibly quickly if the next stage of people calling for the Prime Minister to resign publicly rises through the ranks. We've already had backbench MPs, PPSs, a junior minister. There is only one further rung of the ministerial ladder to hear from, and that's the Cabinet.
Tom, thank you. Extraordinary day. What a time to be a political reporter. And as Tom was saying there, Andrew, no particular process has been triggered yet. We don't know exactly what's going to happen.
Well, to trigger a leadership contest, one of the contenders needs to get 81 signatures of backbench of MPs. And that's a big ask. That's a big ask. We've got our panel with us. We've got Kevin Maguire, co-host of Piers vs Maguire podcast, and just commentator Piers Pottinger. Kevin, you're a lifelong Labour man. Can you conceive, could you ever imagine when Starmer walked triumphantly into Downing Street with a majority of 174, 172, that within a year and 10 months we'd be at this position? No, but he did only win with 34% of the vote, which was a record low. To get a majority of vote was split on the
fewer votes
on the right.
Corbyn in 2019.
That's right, who got 40%, and it was only 2 higher than Corbyn got in 2019, which was 32%. So there was always a fragility around his leadership, and that he got off to the worst of starts, because he had no real plan. He was too gloomy. 3 weeks in, winter fuel was taken away from most pensioners. There was a row at the same time about his own glasses and suits, pales into insignificance compared to the £5 million Nigel Farage has taken from a Thai-based crypto tycoon. But nevertheless,
it was a row. All going to be different, and then, they? Labour said they'd be squeaky clean, and grown-ups are back in power, the chaos was over. This is chaos, Kevin.
Yeah, he lost the initiative, and he's never been able to get it back. Labour's had 2 drubbing in local polls last year as well as this year. He's hemorrhaging votes on the left to the Greens, and he's losing seats and some votes on the right to Reform.
And he's brazening it out, as I thought he would. Can he? If he can survive if the cabinet don't move against him?
Yeah, I think I'm not sure he can survive now. I think you either jump or you will be pushed. I do recall Gordon Brown in 2008, 2009, early 2010 when he was Prime Minister, 3 times beat off attempted coups. But Keir Starmer isn't Gordon Brown. Yeah. He hasn't got the team around him. What's saving Starmer to some extent now is there is no candidate head and shoulders above the rest
to succeed him. Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, of course, fancies his chances, needs to go quick. Angela Rayner needs to go slower because of her tax affairs aren't sorted. And Andy Burnham wants it to go slower still, the Greater Manchester Mayor, so he can get a seat in Parliament.
Which isn't an easy thing.
No.
Piers Potter, this is the chaos of the Tory years revisited.
It is. It's. I mean, who would have thought that so quickly into his time this situation would unfold? Starmer has shown himself now, I'm afraid, not to be a man of integrity. Because if he was a man of integrity, he would resign. He keeps saying he made mistakes and he takes responsibility, but he's not taking responsibility. If he took responsibility, he would be a man of honour and resign. The problem is that then I think in the circumstances we'd get the deputy leader, the deputy prime minister, who people are forgetting is Calamity Lammy. And I mean, that is even... The problem is, without Starmer, look at the bunch we're facing.
But he could do what Aunt Theresa May did. She announced she was going in May, and she left in July, giving the Tories time to elect her.
Well, I think this business of an orderly departure, it's not very orderly, it's very messy. But, I mean, if he can set a timetable, we're not that far away from September when their conference is, so they can do this. They've got this absurd voting procedure within the Labour Party. But this is actually more than the Labour Party. This is to do with the running of the country. And at the moment, it's installed. No one is doing anything at the moment because of this.
But Piers, he's deeply unpopular amongst his own party, amongst the people, but it doesn't actually follow that it's the responsible thing for him to do to step down. If in 6 months' time we end up with a very left-wing Prime Minister, markets crashed, requiring a bailout, mortgage rates through the roof, will we really be thanking him then for standing down?
That will happen with him. Because
the bond markets are in a mess already.
The reason he's so unpopular is he's proven to be completely and utterly useless.
Quite like a more left-wing Prime Minister. Can I just say, who is putting more money in the pockets of working people and improving public services at a better rate? There are enough people still to tax who are doing very well from capital gains. No. You could. You know
it. The wealthy pay more tax proportionally than has ever been the case in history. And they will if you tax them anymore.
It's who pays
There are two economies, Kevin, one for the rich and one for the poor.
Business as usual is not working for working people.
So, Kevin...
Because your government's put taxes up so much.
I'm putting you in the Electoral College of Labour, because just to remind people, it's Labour MPs have a vote, party members have a vote, and trade union members have a vote.
Yes, and it's one person, one vote.
Yes, but it's a cumbersome, lengthy process, as Piers alluded to. Who would you choose?
It's not.
Who takes over?
It's not cumbersome. It's quite simple.
Well, how long will it take?
You could probably do it in 2 months. You can go to 3 months. You can do it. No, it's not necessarily all chaos as you do it.
But you've got to name that Prime Minister for 2 months. The civil service will go on strike. The markets will be fearing who comes next.
Look, this isn't what happened with Liz Truss.
The Tories did it in 3 weeks.
Yeah. You can do that quickly, but that was an emergency, and look where it got them.
I mean, the fact of the matter is it isn't just Starmer that caused the vote. It's the whole government. Every single one of them in every department has failed this country shamefully. This government is putting more people out of work. It rewards people.
There's 800,000 more people in work.
It is an absolutely outrageous
That's factually incorrect.
Government.
There's 800,000 more people in work.
Unemployment, Kevin, has gone up every month bar one since they got into power.
But there are 800,000 more people in work.
Unemployment has gone up every month. Every month.
We're talking
under
about
a Labour government.
The number of people, though, are in work because the workforce has got bigger. There are 800,000 more people in work.
Kevin, nearly 1 million young people between 18 and 25, not in work, not in employment, not in training.
You can critique the government, but there are some just verifiable facts, and one of them is 800,000 more people are in work.
You didn't tell me. If you were to have a vote, who is the man or woman who's going to save this country?
I would have thought, and this is a dilemma for the Labour Party and the UK Labour government, is clearly the Greater Manchester Mayor, Andy Burnham, is the most popular. And he hasn't got a seat. And that is a problem. You have to get him into Parliament first. You may not be able to get him into Parliament because the opposition parties would throw everything.
And that could take weeks. A by-election takes weeks to organise.
A month, at least a month.
So that's going to delay the leadership contest even longer.
Andy Burnham, let's not forget, when he was a minister in the past, he was in 3 different departments only for a year at a time, mostly less than a year, and he achieved 0 in his time. I mean, he would be a disaster. He may be a little more of a populist figure, and he certainly comes across as a warmer personality. It wouldn't be difficult.
He can communicate.
He can communicate a bit better than Starmer. As I say, that's not difficult. It's not a very high bar, but it's a pretty awful prospect to have either Starmer, Burnham, who's in a tax quagmire, Streeting, who's clearly mad and insanely ambitious, and you just need to look at his eyes to realise
you don't want any of them, do you? You want Bay to knock off Farage.
Yeah, but hang on.
But if you look at Labour, you've got to think who would do better for Labour.
We've got to go back to Andy Burnham. What is a safe seat? So they finally persuade somebody to go to the House of Lords, causing a by-election. Voters don't like unnecessary by-elections. Where is a safe seat?
Even
Labour lost 25 seats in Manchester last week.
Even on those figures Labour had at the last council elections last Thursday, it would have won 100+ seats in Parliament. I accept that a by-election is special and it may not be replicated. No, it would be a huge gamble. And if you don't have him, in the race, you undermine then destroying the legitimacy whoever is elected.
The gold medalist in the race.
Before we bring Piers in, we have got some breaking news. It's Steve Reid. Steve Reid, of course, the Housing Secretary and a key Starmer loyalist, is calling for unity.
But he would, wouldn't he?
I'm sure that'll help, Piers.
Oh, that's marvellous, isn't it?
He is Starmer's best mate in the Cabinet.
Yeah. Don't forget, incidentally, we have still got a raft of Mandelson papers to come out. That could cause Starmer even more embarrassment.
And West Streeting.
West Streeting's the crucial bit.
Particularly.
West Streeting was very close to Peter Mandelson.
So there's more of that to come. We've got a situation here where also the spectre of Ed Miliband, I think it's unlikely that he would become leader, but he's very popular in the party, and his lunatic policies that are causing such damage to business in this country, insane policies by, as I call him, Millie Mad, quite rightly, because he is the one who really ought to be seeking medical
he's
attention.
a net zero zealot.
Yes, it's...
What you mean, protecting us from oil and gas price shocks in the future?
I've written it, and I think you know it. We know that Miliband was so bruised by losing in 2015 because he thought he was going to win, and the Tories won their first majority for a very long time. They've said he couldn't possibly do it again. But if Miliband, if Andy Burnham can't come back, does Ed Miliband run? Because he won't want West Streeting.
I don't think he will. I think he's eyeing the Treasury and being Chancellor. And the reason I think Labour would have a particular problem with Ed Miliband isn't all that nonsense you've just spouted. It is because he fought a general election and lost
badly.
And lost. You get a clean skin. You cannot make that accusation
and people would just go
against
back to why did you lose before, and if you change that.
That's right.
And you would see endlessly him eating that bacon sandwich.
I've come up with the solution for the future government. The ideal one would be to programme artificial intelligence based on Margaret Thatcher's policies and her speeches, and we could have an exhumed Margaret Thatcher as our leader, because that's what this country needs.
What with the poll tax and our own party turning on her and kicking her out of power.
She won 3 elections, Kevin.
Yeah,
she won 3 elections.
She went mad.
She stayed a bit longer than this bloke.
She went mad.
But this guy has been a Prime Minister for 1 year and 10 months, and there's been questions over his leadership going back months
and months. But he's had 19 new terms.
But of our recent Prime Ministers,
every kind of scandal, corruption.
Is clearly
he appointed Mandelson.
He's clearly had longer than Liz Truss. I think he might have had longer than Rishi Sunak now.
No, I think Sunak got to 2 years.
Is he, Joe? So he'll almost beat him.
And these things matter to Prime Ministers, because Theresa May was desperate to last longer than others. But I mean, Miriam is pointing out her daughter was born in 2010.
That's the 8th Prime Minister.
8th Prime Minister.
That's
We're
astonishing.
turning into a banana republic.
In
16 years.
Brown
every 2 years.
Cameron May.
Brown at the beginning.
Oh, Brown. That's why you get your 8.
We used to laugh at Italy for having all these prime ministers.
We've turned into banana
now,
republic.
actually, they've got probably the best in Europe.
They have Maloney's
Georgia
very
Maloney,
stable,
who
very
everyone
stable.
loves.
Hang on, she's in trouble in Italy. Not everybody loves her, but far from it.
A lot of people do.
Some do.
What do you think of a cabinet minute? I mean, cabinet of hearing the Prime Minister saying, "I'm not going." Boris was finished when the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rishi Sunak, and his Housing Secretary, was it Housing Secretary?
Steve Reed.
Boris's Housing Secretary was
Michael
Sajid Javid.
Yeah,
They
no,
quit.
he was the Health Secretary. Yes, he did quit.
So that was the end of it, beginning of the end. Does it take 2 or 3 cabinet ministers to say, "I'm resigning"?
I think so. Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, if she's been in there and told him to go, set a timetable, I think she's in a really difficult
do you think she
position now.
Put money where her mouth is?
Wes Streeton will have to think, does he put his hat in the ring?
But he doesn't want to be seen as the executioner.
He might have to be.
Well, panel, let's leave it on that.
Can I just say before we go, your lot can't even organise a coup. What happened to Catherine West? She was going to move against him. There was going to be a letter. She changed her mind. She's written a letter. There was a typo in her email. Pathetic.
Well, panel,
I'll just say 2 words to you: Liz and Truss.
Panel, let's hold it there. We'll come back to you later. But we're now going to go to GB News Deputy Political Editor, Tom Harwood. He is in Westminster. Tom, interesting tweet from Steve Reed calling for unity. Do you think that will cut it?
This is the message that we're going to hear from the people around the Prime Minister, that now is not the time to make a move. Steve Reed pointing to the markets, saying that this has real consequences for real people's lives. Of course, the cost of government borrowing has jumped today, and I think we're going to hear a lot more from people around the Prime Minister that the games, as they would describe it, being played in Parliament are making the situation worse for the country. On the other hand, of course, people might point to the fact that that borrowing costs were rising anyway, that they are much higher in this country than any other G7 country. Some critical economists have described what they call a moron premium on the cost of our debt. Because of the way that the economy has been managed in this country, uniquely, we have higher borrowing costs than other comparative countries. But that's the economics of it. Fundamentally, this comes down to politics. And politics is what's playing here on so many different levels. Yes, we have this widespread discontent within the Labour Party, but one of the interesting things about this is it is widespread, that word. It's not due to one faction or another faction, and we know that the Labour Party has been riven with factionalism for many, many years. But if you look at the names who've come out calling for the Prime Minister to go, some of them sit on the sort of centre-right of the Labour Party, many of them are from the left of the Labour Party, some are seen as being careerists. There isn't a clear factional direction of those calling for the Prime Minister to go. And that's worrying for the Prime Minister, because he clearly is not fitting the bill for a wide spread of MPs. He's seen as an electoral liability and, frankly, as someone who didn't do what he promised to do. There was a widespread belief in the Labour Party that just having sensible people in Downing Street, rather than the unruly Tories, would fix everything in this country. All you need is the adults back in the room and everything will work out fine. Well, clearly that theory has been tested to destruction. There are structural problems with this country that have led to this carousel of prime ministers over the last 7 years. I think it is no wonder that we are seeing such fragility in our politics, that we're seeing prime ministers on average over the course of the last 6 or 7 years last 2 years each. This is the sort of world that Italy found itself in decades past. It's the sort of world that all countries find themselves in when there is no growth, when people don't feel better off in their pockets. When people in the country are hurting, it's very quick to blame politicians, because ultimately politicians have the power to change things. They have the power to make those difficult decisions. I heard in your discussion earlier you were talking a bit about Margaret Thatcher. Now, perhaps her solutions to the 1980s wouldn't fit the solutions today, but clearly she took on the dragons. At the time, the things holding back the British economy were union power, grinding the economy to a halt. Today, it's not union power so much that's the big drag anchor on the British economy, but there are other problems. Look at how people can't do much in business without being dragged through judicial review. Look how hard it is to build things in this country. Look at all of the difficulties that politicians have been refusing to deal with, and how that's dragged down our economy. Fundamentally, it's that economic weakness that has led to this political instability for Prime Minister after Prime Minister after Prime Minister. It is, I think, there is very little doubt that the Prime Minister would have been able to survive, for example, the Mandelson scandal, if people felt better off in their pockets. I mean, after all, Tony Blair managed to survive not one but two Mandelson scandals while he was Prime Minister, and there was a growing economy, and each and every year people were feeling better off. The proceeds of growth could fund better public services. That's not the world we're living in today. We're living in a much more fragile world because the politicians haven't taken on the big questions.
Tom Harwood, our Deputy Political Editor, thank you so much for that report. From the heart of Parliament, we can see Big Ben behind him there, on College Green, where, of course, normally all the politicians are keen to be seen.
Exactly. So they're all now, obviously, ensconced in Westminster, in Houses of Parliament, waiting for the outcome of the Cabinet, because when people leave the Cabinet, will any of them say anything to the cameras? Famously, of course, Kevin, you remember in 1986 when Mike Heseltine walked out of Cabinet, announced his resignation over the Western affair, and people thought to bring her down. Is Wes Streeting, the great showman, going to announce, I've decided to throw my hat in the ring when he relieves the ring?
Yeah, I've no idea. It's not impossible. People will resign, or they may all come out, and one person may be designated to go out and speak on behalf of the Prime Minister. Steve Reid, Pat McFadden, one of his faithfuls, while the traitors stay silent.
What should happen to the King's speech tomorrow?
Well,
because this is a serious constitutional matter.
Oh, it is. I mean, I think the King might open by using the old joke. I mean, take my government. Someone, please. Well, I mean, he's got a really difficult task because I think, in all seriousness, with this situation, unless it is resolved today, and let's look at a worst-case scenario, the situation stays as it is, but very, very rocky, and it keeps splintering right into tomorrow, and then the King's speech is going to have to be a speech based on the policies of a government that may actually, none of the cabinet ministers may be in position in a few months' time. It's nonsense.
Should it be postponed?
No, that ain't going to happen. It's a programme for a government. This is a question who will head that government.
Well,
and to some extent,
Starmer moved the King's speech deliberately because he wanted to use that as a way to help save him from the disastrous results he was expecting. So he knew this was going to be as bad as this, and he's standing there. He made this terrible speech yesterday, which did him more harm than good.
I agree with that.
And, you know, as I said earlier, if he was a man of integrity, he would resign by now.
Kevin, who in number 10, who was the brain box who spun all over the weekend? This is the speech that will save the Prime Minister's premiership. He's going to be visionary and passionate. Well, he can't do any of that. No. He's not an orator. No. And there's nothing inside. All we learnt was he's going to ban some far-right march at the weekend and nationalise British Steel, which I thought he'd already announced already.
No, they hadn't announced the nationalising it of Scunthorpe.
Subject to a public interest test, by the way.
Yeah,
we're bailing it out.
But it is. Yeah, that's
exactly.
what it should have been nationalised a year ago.
Well, I said that last
in April. In April last year.
£1.2 million a day, I think it's
1.3 it is now. Yeah.
Before we move on, we're hearing that the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, has pulled out of an event in the City of London this morning. The Treasury has confirmed that she was due to take part in a fireside chat with the Lady Mayor of London at the city's Global Risks Summit after attending Cabinet. She's pulled out, I assume, because there are too many difficult questions.
Well, because there's a bonfire going on.
I mean, there's no way the Chancellor's about to resign over because he's the only one who'll keep her in a job.
She's clinging on for dear life.
No, but they will want to try and speak officially with one voice. So somebody will be put out. But I think the Prime Minister himself is going to have to speak. But he may be saving it until tomorrow.
Well,
because
Prime Minister's questions.
Yeah, and you also but he'll have to present the King's speech in the afternoon to Parliament, and then there is a debate.
That's right.
And all the opponents.
Kemi Badenoch will respond for the Tories.
Absolutely, which she'll be relishing it.
Of course she will.
He won't be. I mean, that's the situation.
I don't think he'll make it to then.
Don't you?
I have a feeling that this last stand, this kind of Custer's last stand, is really not going to work. And I would expect there to be a cabinet resignation any minute.
But that doesn't necessarily get rid of you. Now, Boris Johnson fought on until he could not anymore. Gordon Brown, I'll go back to 2008, 9, 10. He fought them off. 2009, he had 3 cabinet resignations. He lost his Home Secretary, Work and Pensions Secretary, and the Community Secretary, Local Government Secretary, and he survived.
Yeah, but as you made the point there, Gordon Brown had a great history in the Labour Party.
Very different.
He's been around a long time. This guy's only been an MP for 5 minutes.
But he may. Look, he should just say, look, here's the timetable. I accept. It's time. It's time for change. He's not. It doesn't mean he'll be gone tomorrow.
Should the constitution of this country be rewritten so that we can't have these terrible leadership crises?
No, I don't think it's to do with the constitution.
The Tories got rid of the Tories had 3 Prime Ministers in a year.
No, I think it's more to do with the Labour Party constitution and the way, of course, it's run effectively by its paymasters, the trade unions, who cause so much havoc in this country.
Piers, you are in the 80s with Thatcher. Look, it doesn't work. It doesn't work like that. I've actually long thought.
Well,
like 5 years is too long for a parliament. It should be 4. I like the Fixed Term Parliament Act the Conservatives and Lib Dems introduced, so you can't just call it a general election when you like. I thought that was a good idea. I'd like electoral reform, so it's a fairer system. And I would also like a clause, if you change parties, you're an MP, you have to fight a by-election, and if you change Prime Ministers after 3 months, 6 months, whatever the period is, you've got to have a general election. Because although it's a parliamentary system, and this is entirely within the rules, it always feels a bit wrong because there's a presidential side to it.
I mean, I do agree. I think even when Boris Johnson went, there should have been a general election. Because I think a change of Prime Minister and a Prime Minister because effectively these elections now come down, rather like in America, to presidential, to individuals and the leaders. And for that reason, I think you cannot change Prime Minister and not have a general election.
But you can. It's perfectly legal under the system because it's a parliamentary system.
You both agree
I think it's wrong. I think it's wrong and there should be a general election. And I'd like to, I mean, God help us if we had one now, because we'd get the most fractured
we could end up with a Labour-Green coalition.
For everyone.
Hurrah!
What, with that Polanski? There's somebody there's the First Minister coming out. Now, that is Steve Reed, the Housing Secretary.
Is he going to
talk to the cameras? He is. I thought he would. We're going to go to Downing Street.
Well, we can see Steve Reed talking to journalists there now, and I wonder if he'll be telling them that the Prime Minister is going to hang on. And, of course, one of two things could happen now. Either things will change by the end of the day, or there could be a lull.
That was a very short statement by Steve Reed, who's clearly made his statement and was not willing to take any questions. Now, there'll be more Cabinet Ministers leaving because the Cabinet meeting is over. It'll be interesting to see who leaves last. Because how long does West Streeting stay? And who's leaving now?
Lisa Nandy.
Lisa Nandy.
James Murray, Treasury Secretary.
Who won't have any impact. Lisa Nandy, of course, ran for leadership, Kevin, against Keir Starmer.
She did. She finished a poor third in 2020, wasn't it? When it was. But nevertheless, she's a voice for Andy Burnham now.
Yeah, she is. And so we can see the Deputy Prime Minister, David Lammy.
Of course, Lisa Nandy did say yesterday that Andy Burnham should not be blocked again from returning to power.
Well, they all seem to be saying that now. They weren't saying it at the time, Kevin.
No, a few did, but a lot of others did, because they didn't want to challenge the Prime Minister, because clearly he always says it's left to Labour's National Executive Committee, but they did his bit.
We've just seen the Chancellor leaving with her good friend Emma Reynolds, the Environment Secretary. They were both smiling and chatting. You would not think there is a major crisis engulfing 10 Downing Street. No sign yet of West Streeting.
No, absolutely. But a cabinet meeting that's lasted just an hour, which is extraordinary given what's going on.
It should have been talking about the King's speech, but I imagine most of it was talking about the Prime Minister's future.
No Ed Miliband, no Wes Streeting.
No, and no Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, who could be major players in a leadership contest.
Well, of course, we will be following that all day. And I do think, Andrew, one of two things could happen now. Either the Prime Minister will hold firm, he will keep deciding that he's going to stay on, and there'll be a lull, because it will take some time for leadership challengers to gather those 81 signatures. It might take days, potentially even weeks, especially if they decide to delay things till Andy Burnham could return. So that we could see a lull now. Alternatively, if cabinet ministers start to resign, as Kevin has said, in quick succession, then it may be that Starmer has to change his mind and either resign or set out some sort of timetable. But he could still cling on, Andrew and Kevin. Piers, do you think there is a chance that he will just carry on?
There is. I mean, he's so deluded.
And keep going.
He's so deluded. I think he could. It's interesting. I think another person who hasn't come out is Lord Hermer, who, of course, is one of his closest buddies, and legally and in terms of the Attorney General, will be the man he consults most about his position, and also in terms of process with the King's speech. There may be a lot of discussion still going on, and the fact there's no statement yet is very relevant, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Steve Reid would talk for longer, because he is the Prime Minister's probably most trusted aide in the cabinet.
Him or Darren Jones, but they go out and they fight for and put the Prime Minister's case. He will have come up and said something like he's carrying on.
Yeah,
is what he's staying put.
Who is the Chief Secretary to the Prime? Now this is Peter Kyle, who is the Business Secretary. He's now talking to journalists too. Now he is incredibly close to Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary. Ed Miliband is just leaving. Not saying a word to the media. Hilary Benn, the Northern Ireland Secretary. He's been around a long time, seen it all before, of course. But Peter Kyle is engaged in quite a long conversation, so we'll bring you, as soon as we can, what he's saying. But he is clearly supporting the Prime Minister. Otherwise, I think he wouldn't be.
It'll be organised. Those who speak will have been asked to speak on behalf of the Prime Minister. Those who are less supportive will be asked to say nothing. And Liz Kendall...
Liz Kendall is going to talk to the media. Well, she'll be sacked.
It's kind of what you would call the Blairite ring of Labour here. Liz Kendall, Peter Kyle, Steve Reid. We're really just now lacking Darren Jones, and then you've probably got the four.
But there was speculation
Pat McFadden
that Darren Jones could even be a candidate to be Labour leader.
Yeah, I think this is
very ambitious.
Very ambitious.
Yeah, but I think it's getting into a mad world, that speculation.
Well, because the thing is, Kevin, you and I know so many MPs who think it could be me.
Look, of course, it'll go to bed at night thinking I may get the call. And if you're Darren Jones, you never want to say no, I'm not interested. No, I've got no chance, because you want to be courted by either the current Prime Minister or the next Prime Minister and given a job.
And so this is Liz Kendall. She's now talking to more media. So this will all have been agreed.
These are the faithfuls.
But the real question is, if these cabinet ministers are now supporting him as they say, obviously they are, what did the Prime Minister give them to support them?
Yeah. Well, now
what has he conceded or said?
Right, this is the fifth of the faithfuls, I would say.
He's the Work and Pension Secretary. Now, he is an uber loyalist. He was in number 10 as a political advisor to Tony Blair, so he's been around a very long time. Solid, steady, not a leadership contender.
He looks exhausted.
Yeah.
Slumped shoulders.
Well, he's fed up defending the Prime Minister. Don't you think, Kevin? It must be becoming very tiresome.
Well, it's hard. He's a veteran of the last Labour government and the Blair and Brown.
He was in Brown's cabinet.
Yes, so he kind of knows the risks of attempted coups, leadership challenges, changes of Prime Minister, however we wish to describe it. But that's interesting. The 5 people who have come up to speak are all known supporters of Keir Starmer at the moment.
Yeah. And he looks as happy as a pallbearer, doesn't he? Which is what he probably is.
He's got granite face features at the best of times, as Pat McFadden.
Yeah, except when he goes...
He's a doer Scotsman.
Except when he listens to Bruce Springsteen, I think that's the only time.
Yeah.
I'm going to say he lets his hair down, but you can't let it down.
He's probably also absolutely exhausted. I mean, I remember during the last days of Boris Johnson and then Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak, MPs are living on adrenaline at this point, not knowing what's going to happen next, unsure what to do, watching on Twitter like everybody else to see who's said what. He's probably not slept.
But, I mean, if you're leading a party that has made it clear right across the board, as Tom Harwood made a very good point, it's the breadth of people who are not supporting him. If you've got a complete range of most of the party saying it's over, and he's not accepting it, and the vote in the local elections made it clear what the electorate
the worst results ever.
He is not listening. He is deluding himself.
Yeah. Three quarters of these non-ministerial MPs haven't called for him to go. I mean, look, I think it's hugely significant the number who have.
MPs, 81.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not the entire party.
Not even 25%.
And
it's across the
spectrum. And until
it's a junior minister.
Yeah, and until or if you get cabinet resignations, he may attempt to tough it out.
It doesn't feel, Kevin, like that there's about to be a cabinet resignation because wouldn't you send the 5 out after the cabinet minister had resigned?
Yeah, but the person who's going to resign may not resign there and then. If there is anybody like that, they may go back, think about it, and then put in a letter of resignation. I'm not saying they will.
As we speak, Wes Streeting staying behind to tell the Prime Minister why, with a heavy heart, he's going to resign from the cabinet.
Or he has another meeting, or he's left via the Whitehall exit.
You explain that.
Which number 10 is connected to the Cabinet Office, which is on Whitehall itself, and you can go out there without having to go through the gates, and there's less fuss. Now, that could be telling in itself if you're dodging questions, or you could just say, look, this isn't a day for me to be shouted at in number 10.
Yeah.
But Ed Miliband brays it out. Now, he's believed to have told the Prime Minister to set a timetable.
Well, somebody else just left, but I'm not quite sure who that is, Kevin.
Piers, isn't there a more fundamental problem here, which is that we've seen politicians, whether that's Keir Starmer, Boris Johnson, Rishi Sunak, promise to do things that people want to be done, whether that is cut the cost of living, stop the boats. And yet, time after time, the words just do not match reality.
No.
It's unclear to me, even if someone does replace Starmer with more charisma, that they're going to be able to close that gap.
Well, the famous television interview Starmer gave with Andrew Neil, where he made all these pledges, and he'd broken every single one of them. I mean, the man, it's far from U-turns, and he keeps saying, oh, I understand people's frustration. It's not frustration, it's anger.
Yeah.
I mean, the British people are telling Starmer loud and clear, we don't want you as our leader. Yeah. Because he's not actually leading anything. He's got no vision, no real idea what to do. His only solution to anything is either international law or run to Europe.
We've not had a Prime Minister since the Second World War who's won the popular vote in a general election. On the question of boats, they haven't smashed the gangs, but numbers are down by a third. Net migration's fallen dramatically. It's about a quarter of what it was. But of course, 2/3 of people think it's rising when they are both falling.
Kevin, explain to me, Carl Turner was on this morning, the MP, he's now an independent MP, he lost the whip over.
He's a Labour Party member, but he's suspended.
He said, I've been a Labour Party member for 40 years, been campaigning on the doorsteps for 40 years. He said he has never, ever encountered such visceral hostility to a Labour leader. He said it dwarfs the anger over Corbyn. Yeah. And he, I think he resigned as Shadow Attorney General over Jeremy Corbyn and anti-Semitism. Why has he triggered such distaste amongst the voters?
I think there are two reasons. One is his mistakes, and he always only won a small, although 34% looks much higher than the 26-27% reform polling. But I think there's been a death of deference, and social media has highlighted failings, and people now get used to hurling abuse at politicians, and all respect is gone. There's no way Margaret Thatcher in this current era would last 11 years. Tony Blair wouldn't last 10 years. There's no way Robert Walpole would last 21 or 22 years as he did at the beginning. I think that's changed, but he has made big mistakes.
I think Kevin's point is absolutely true here, is valid, because the social media is, without any doubt, caused an enormous rise in the appalling behaviour towards all politicians. And not just politicians, but people in general. Common courtesy, civility are really in the decline and quite often very hard to find. And I'm afraid this social media hatred that comes so quickly and so viciously is really a very damaging force. I am sure that one of the things, should Starmer succeed, he will do is start this ban on social media for under 16s, as they've done in Australia.
I wish he'd get on with it.
Well, I think he's going to do that.
Although in Australia, more than half of under 16s say they still use it. But that's not to say there isn't a case for a ban.
Speech. If you know, I think it'll be in the King's speech. Along with giving up everything back to Europe, which is what he's planning to do.
No, he's not.
I think you're right about social media in terms of it's enabling a lot more coarse discourse than we've had before, and 24/7 news, which makes everything speed up. But I think there's something more going on, which is this political realignment that we hear people talking about. And I think the two main parties, or what were the two major parties, they're certainly not now, the Conservatives and the Labour Party, are now split down different lines than before, which makes it impossible for any faction to gain a majority. Let me finish. This is exactly what happened under the last government. The reason that Rishi Sunak couldn't stop the boats is because had he tried to do what was necessary, leave the ECHR, deliver a more hardline version of the Rwanda plan, half of his party would not have voted it through. Starmer and whoever replaces him are in exactly the same position now in the Labour Party. Half of his MPs might vote for the kind of welfare cuts and changes to public spending that are necessary, but the other half wouldn't. And whoever takes over, nobody will have a majority for any actual change. And we are stuck. We're in this stasis now because the political parties no longer represent the kind of dividing lines that we really see.
Yes, I think that's true. And also the social media is really responsible for the success of Zach Polanski. And, I mean, if you think Starmer's bad, look at Polanski. Lie after lie after lie. The man is really questionable. I mean, he's basically an unemployed actor who's a bit of a drifter, who's got himself into a series of jobs in the past, including hypnotherapy for about 10 minutes. And he's made endless claims, speaking for the Red Cross, lie. He's said he was on the Council of Hypnotherapists, lie. He's now, it appears, is not paying his council tax.
On his house.
Where have we heard that before? I wonder if Angela Rayner's listening. I mean, this is absolutely
the psychodrama in the Labour Party means Zach Polanski is getting away with what I would call political murder.
Well, he will for a bit until it's resolved. You're quite right. But look, we've got a fracturing of our politics for this country, and people are demanding change, but people want very different change. And the electoral system gives you the tyranny of the minority, whereby parties win power without winning the popular vote or being forced to create coalitions to broader represent people in the country. I was no great fan of the Conservative Liberal Democrat coalition, but nevertheless there were two parties there that if you added up their public vote, there was a majority.
Yeah, and if you looked at the local election results last week, Reform Tories would be on 47. The others
51.
51.
Yeah, the left.
So the left could form the coalition.
Greens, Labour, Lib Dems, more votes than Reform and Tories.
That is Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, just leaving number 10. He's pointedly not speaking to the media. I've never known Wes Streeting not speak to the media.
He doesn't have the normal bounce in his step that we've become accustomed
to. And he is, so what's gone on?
Has he been sacked?
Well,
that's a very good question.
That would be interesting. If he's been sacked, then there's definitely a leadership contest underway. Perhaps Kevin Starmer thinks he'd beat him.
He might. Now, of course, I'm just going back. John Major beat off John Redwood in the Conservative era.
Closer than people remember.
Yeah, Jeremy Corbyn lost a vote of the Parliamentary Labour Party in 2016, but then won the resulting election. I doubt, if it came down to Starmer v Streeting, I very much doubt that Starmer would win that.
OK, we're going to go to our GBNews political correspondent, Catherine Forster, who's in Downing Street. Catherine?
Yes, well, good morning from Downing Street, where the Cabinet have been emerging following that critical meeting. We just saw Wes Streeting in the last moment or two, absolutely tight-lipped. He normally quite likes to talk to the media, but not today, because, of course, he is the #1 candidate, potentially, if the Prime Minister should fall. Now, what we are hearing from the Cabinet Ministers who have spoken to the press is that no one challenged the Prime Minister, saying he should stand down publicly in that Cabinet meeting. So Peter Kyle, the Business Secretary, has said that the Prime Minister is showing, quote, really steadfast leadership, and say that they had a purposeful meeting talking about the big issues facing our economy and society. Nothing has been triggered. Liz Kendall, the Science Secretary, also said that they talked about the challenges we faced as a country, and said, look, this government will do what we were elected to do, which is serve the British people. The Prime Minister has my full support in this. The Labour chairwoman and attorney, also said Prime Minister's got full support. And Pat McFadden, Work and Pensions Secretary, has said, asked what to do, that the government should carry on. So outwardly now, a show of support from Cabinet Ministers emerging, apart from Wes Streeting, who didn't say anything. Now, all the questions now, 81 MPs have put their names forward. That would be enough to trigger a challenge, but there's no agreement as to who that candidate should be. Many suspect that Wes Streeting might decide to move. His allies told me this morning that he's been very clear to the Prime Minister that he won't start this off, but if the Prime Minister's position is untenable, then yes, he's ready to go, and we know that he's one of several who would like his job. Of course, Andy Burnham, who would like his job and probably would be the favourite, is Mayor of Greater Manchester and doesn't even have a seat. So if things accelerate quickly, that rules him out. Angela Rayner too, but she's still mired in tax affairs with the HMRC. All the while, we've got the King's speech tomorrow. So let us see what the next few hours brings. Things could move very quickly, or there could be a pause. We could get through the King's speech and the Prime Minister could still be in office. At the moment, simply no one knows.
Catherine Forster outside Downing Street. Well, let's move slightly down Whitehall towards College Green, where Tom Harwood, our Deputy Political Editor, is waiting for us there. Tom, the 81 names is significant, but they're not united around a particular candidate, and therefore it's merely only a petition, isn't it? There's nothing particularly worrying for Starmer in that number.
That's right, it's a symbolic number rather than one that triggers something automatically. Now, if 81 names were to publicly declare to one particular candidate, that would automatically force a leadership contest. But I think there's something else that is now in that number. I think we're up to 82 or 83. This is the number that actually wipes out the government's majority in the House of Commons. If around 83 MPs were to rebel on any piece of legislation, it would mean defeat for the government. And we have seen that before, where the government's had to retreat from its legislative agenda and U-turn. And we've seen that the government, despite its enormous majority, has been very, very fragile on particular issues. But now we have what would be, in mathematical terms, an absolute majority of the House of Commons declaring they have no confidence in the Prime Minister. Now, it's not a formal no-confidence motion, of course it's not, but it is indicative that actually this is a Prime Minister who hasn't just lost the confidence of over a quarter of his party, but in mathematical terms, more than half the House of Commons. That carries weight. But also, of course, were a politician to launch a challenge against the Prime Minister, they could be relatively confident of the sort of names that they could get to back them, because now 83, 84, maybe even 85 of these names are in the public domain. There'll be others who are keeping their powder dry and their mouths shut for now. The question is, will someone in the cabinet? Will a putative leadership contender take that next step? There have been some commentary online talking about leadership contests or almost leadership contests in other political parties. And most famously, I'm sure it's been discussed on this channel already, in 1995, Michael Portillo had phone lines installed outside his potential campaign office. It was seen that he was preparing to challenge John Major, but then he never challenged John Major. It's seen as if he might have missed his moment then, walking up to the brink and then retreating. Well, it looks as if there have been several members of the cabinet who have been preparing for a leadership contest. The people who've been wining and dining their colleagues, who've been going for secret dinners over the course of the last few months, people like Angela Rayner and Wes Streeting. And of course, Andy Burnham too has been working on his campaign, his shadow campaign, for many months now. Well, those are just three names at the top of the Labour Party who could say something today, who could fire that starting gun today. And in many ways, it looks like the Prime Minister is challenging them to do just that. In his statement, he said that, yes, 81 politicians have called for him to go within the Labour Party, but they haven't backed one individual. There is no formal contest as we speak. Some might read that as a bit of a challenge. In the words of John Major, put up or shut up. Could it be that the Prime Minister is really challenging his cabinet there to put their money where their mouth is, and for any potential leadership candidate, for anyone who really does want to be Prime Minister, that now is the moment to declare that, to launch that campaign formally and collect those 81 names for them themselves?
All right, that's Tom Harwood of Westminster. Well, I mean, you know, he's brazening it out, Kevin, isn't he? The Prime Minister, at the moment.
And he's digging his defences and erecting his wall while Andy Burnham isn't an MP.
Yeah, who is his biggest threat?
Yeah, and if Andy Burnham was there's no doubt Andy Burnham would win, which is why he was blocked from standing in that by-election a few months back.
Do you buy this idea that if that the National Executive Committee, which decides the candidates for a by-election, has changed its position and would now allow Burnham to run?
Not yet, because it's still controlled by Keir Starmer, but there are elections underway for the constituency section, in which, that's when the results are announced, so he could lose control then. There's a union section, he may be losing. They try to get them to vote as a bloc in solidarity, but that may fracture. So his grip on the party machine will loosen. It's not quite right to say he's in office but not in power, but you can feel after an event like this, you don't have the power, the clout you did, because you can only do it. You can only really do it once, and they'll come again for it.
Over the last 6 months, we've said this might be the thing to finish Starmer, and it hasn't. So, I mean, he is not someone for giving in when it's his own future. And like all prime ministers, when they get the job, they don't really want another job, because this is the best job they've ever had or will have.
Really interesting quote from a piece by Henry Hill in the Critic this morning. He says, "This is a prime minister, remember, who is fighting for his political life, but even with nothing to lose, he has nothing to offer." Which I thought was very astute.
I mean,
what is Keir Starmer about?
That's the truth.
What does he want to be Prime Minister for? What is he offering the country?
Well, the question is, what did he offer the Cabinet? Because I don't believe they all supported him
He said, I'll fight you
voluntarily.
in the last ditch. That's what he said.
Actually, you know, if you're in Scunthorpe and Lincolnshire, you'll be quite happy if you nationalise a steel.
He may have threatened to
Well, of course, there's all left to play for. It could be completely different by the end of the day. Welcome back. It's 11 o'clock on Tuesday, the 12th of May. We are live across the United Kingdom. This is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Miriam Cates.
Going, but he's not gone at all, has he? Sir Keir Starmer tells his cabinet defiantly, I'm not going anywhere. Loyalist cabinet ministers like Steve Reid have rallied MPs to unite behind his chum.
Yes, cabinet ministers coming out making supportive noises about the Prime Minister, all except for Wes Streeting. Will he make his move? It may be the best chance he ever gets.
and all eyes will be on how many people follow him over the brink if indeed he does move. But also in interesting news, some reports now that Andy Burnham has been spotted on a train down to London.
I'm not going to shy away from the fact that I've got some doubters, including in my own party.
Labour's civil war, the Prime Minister's premiership is imploding, ministers are in revolt, one minister has resigned, a rather junior one, but nevertheless 81 MPs have signalled he should go. He thinks he can turn it round.
Meanwhile, his successors are scrambling. Contenders for the top job emerge, but there's no clear frontrunner. We'll have the latest. And...
And we're going to go to Catherine Forster, our chief political correspondent, who is in Downing Street, where it's all been happening.
Yes, it's all been happening, and we've also just heard that Andy Burnham has been spotted getting on a train to London. What might that mean? Of course, he's the mayor of Greater Manchester. He is the prince over the water, if you like. He is the favourite among many Labour MPs to be the next Prime Minister, but he doesn't have a seat. And at the moment, there isn't a vacancy for Prime Minister because a cabinet meeting has just concluded. We've had a succession of cabinet ministers, Liz Kendall, Peter Kyle, Pat McFadden, coming out and saying that the Prime Minister is showing leadership, that they are united on dealing with the challenges facing the country, and basically that he's going nowhere. That is the message that Number 10 briefed to us when the cabinet meeting was still going on. One exception to that sort of show of solidarity was the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, a man who we all know wants to be Prime Minister. He's made no secret of that for many, many years. He came out, he said nothing, but there's so much speculation that he might decide to move now, because I spoke to one of his allies earlier and they said, look, he said he will not start this, but if it comes to a point where it is untenable for the Prime Minister to remain, he is ready to challenge. He's got the numbers and at least he is being honest about it. We don't honestly know what happens next. The King's speech is tomorrow. They've been parading marching bands along St James's Park at 5:30 in the morning in preparation. Are they really going to depose a Prime Minister at this point in time? Nobody knows what happens next. It was a government that came in on the back of Labour chaos, and they promised to end the chaos, to bring stability, and yet here we are again. And if this Prime Minister goes, we could be looking at 6 Prime Ministers in Britain in just 7 years.
Extraordinary.
What a statistic. As I said again, we're a banana republic.
Indeed. We like variety, maybe that's it.
Come on.
Catherine, could it be, though, that Wes Streeting actually manages to leave his rivals for dust here? Because if he is organised, if he has those names and nobody else does yet, then he could take the crown before Andy Burnham's even arrived at St Pancras, or maybe King's Cross from Manchester.
Well, yes, but no, because basically, yes, he's in the best position. Andy Burnham doesn't have a seat. That would take weeks and weeks, even if somebody stood down to allow a by-election, even if the NEC changed their rules, it might be a contest that would rule him out. But there is no way on earth that most people in the Parliamentary Labour Party, so I'm just trying to see who that is. Sorry, so much shouting here, it's absolute chaos. There is no way on earth that the Parliamentary Labour Party are simply going to allow Wes Streeting to take over because he's perceived on the right of the party. Many of them absolutely cannot stand him, and those on the left will not tolerate Wes Streeting just marching in and taking the crown. So they would have to put up their own challenger now. Could it be Angela Rayner, that tax investigation still looming over her? Ed Miliband, well, apparently he would prefer that Andy Burnham came back. He also told the Prime Minister several weeks ago that he should set out a timetable for departure, but maybe he might decide that he has to stand. I don't really see any world in which we have a calm, orderly transition or handover, not least because the Prime Minister is saying he's not going anywhere, but there is no unity at all over who should come next.
And of course, Angela Rayner, Catherine, is on record as saying she'd rather stick pins in her eyes than let Wes Streeting become Prime Minister without a fight. So there would definitely be a bloody battle, and it would be messy.
OK. Are we talking about Jenny Chapman?
We've got Catherine Forster there outside number 10 Downing Street.
I will try to grab Jenny Chapman in a moment. There's a minister just being absolutely mobbed by press, but when she gets away from who she's with, we will see if we can grab her. I would imagine that she's making supportive noises because anybody plotting on removing him will not be coming to talk to us. Also, Jenny Chapman, or Baroness Chapman as she is, was a very big figure behind the scenes in supporting Keir Starmer. It feels like a very, very long time ago now. When he became the leader of the Labour Party. But of course, he became the leader of the Labour Party, promising a lot of things that he then later abandoned. And they got elected, promising an end to the chaos, promising change. They haven't delivered that change quickly enough for people. And there's no agreement on what would be the answer. But I think it's worth bearing in mind that Nigel Farage and Reform campaigned in the elections in England, in Scotland and Wales on a message of vote Reform, get Keir Starmer out. And there's some in Labour absolutely despairing, thinking, why on earth would we do exactly what Reform want us to do and take a leader out now, a leader who is very unpopular with the public but is considered to be good on the international stage.
Catherine, an interesting contrast with the Conservatives' message at the last election, which was vote Reform, get Keir Starmer.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
And so it proved.
Indeed.
And Catherine, if any news on the King's speech, that will still go ahead tomorrow, despite the utter chaos behind the scenes in His Majesty's government.
Well, we're in pretty uncharted territory because I don't think there's ever been a situation that a Prime Minister might have to announce that he's going to go the day before the King's speech. But it seems that it's all set to go ahead. It would be very, very embarrassing for the King indeed to be laying out a legislative agenda if the Prime Minister has already said that he is going to stand down. I don't know what's going to happen in the next few hours, but it could be that people decide to hold their horses for now and we get through the King's speech, but then people move after that. It's very, very febrile for all the people having a nervous breakdown about what has happened in the elections and thinking we need to get rid of him and we need to get rid of him now. There's plenty of others who feel despairing, very sad, and just think that this is absolute madness because they promised change, they promised not to be like the Conservatives. Labour find it difficult to get Prime Ministers into number 10, to get Prime Ministers elected. And of course, if they replace the Prime Minister, opposition parties will say they have no mandate. Just as happened when the Tories removed Boris Johnson, then we had Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak, and people would say the public did not vote for this. And if they change Sir Keir Starmer, the public will not have had the chance to vote for the new leader, and that new leader could take them in a very different direction. Andy Burnham, he said, basically, don't worry too much about the bond markets. Well, the bond markets are absolutely having the heebie-jeebies. The cost of borrowing is going through the roof. It was already high. The stock market is falling. And that's one of the arguments that the Prime Minister used to his cabinet this morning, saying that economic stability is important. Stability is important because if you don't have that, there is an economic cost to all of us. And we are already seeing that play out, and that's happening at a time where things are already not good. We've got war in Ukraine, we've got this conflict in the Middle East, the Strait of Hormuz is closed, our energy bills are going up. Who knows if we're going to get away on summer holidays, and that situation is likely to get dramatically worse. But will Labour MPs listen, and will Wes Streeting take this moment, probably his best chance, because if he doesn't take it now and Andy Burnham gets back in, it may be that he will never get that prime ministerial job that he's always coveted.
And Catherine, quite significantly, one of the ministers who spoke to the media to say the Prime Minister's staying and we all support him is Peter Kyle, the Business Secretary, who is, of course, very, very close to Wes Streeting.
Yes, that's right. Peter Kyle is an ally of Wes Streeting. At the moment, he is sounding loyal. He said we've been talking about the challenges that face the country. We know that the two of them went out to the cinema at the weekend, and I think they saw, was it The Devil Wears Prada 2? I think they did. So they were asked the other day what had been discussed, and Peter Kyle said, well, you know, we always discuss the state of the world and the leadership, but sort of intimated that they hadn't discussed the Prime Minister specifically. to have been a fly on the wall. I think all eyes now on Wes Streeting. Baroness Chapman, will you talk to us? What do you think is going to happen with the Prime Minister? Can he hold on?
Yeah, of course. He's doing a very good job. He's leading the cabinet this morning. He's making decisions about the country. He's putting the people of the country first and not the psychodrama that we could take the opportunity to indulge in. I very much hope we don't. I don't think we will. And I think that what I saw this morning at cabinet was a whole group of people come together and really focus on the needs of this country.
But you promised to stop the chaos. What went wrong?
We will stop the chaos. We will.
Baroness Chapman saying that they will stop the chaos. Well, that is her optimistic view, but it does feel like the chaos, frankly, is already here. Who knows what the coming hours will bring, but we will, of course, bring you every twist and turn here on GB News.
All right, Kath, that's Catherine Forster. Kevin, Baroness Chapman is the uber Starmer loyalist.
Yeah, Jenny Chapman, she's Minister of State in National Development. She's not a cabinet minister, but attends. When he was first elected, she was his chief aide, absolutely loyal. And she kind of had a cheery view of it, which I don't think you get from Steve Reid, who always looks like he wants to nut you. But the dilemma for Wes Streeting, if he doesn't move now, is does he become the David Miliband of this era? If you recall, when Gordon Brown was in, David Miliband, the Foreign Secretary, 3 times he was the champion of people revolting against Gordon Brown, and each time he failed to put his hat in the ring.
He was persuaded not to do it by Peter Mandelson, that well-known political genius.
Well, Piers, we will come to you in a minute, but we are going to go back to Westminster because GB News' deputy political editor Tom Harwood is joining us there from College Green. Tom, we just heard Catherine Forster speak to Baroness Chapman, who said that the government will really focus on the needs of the country. I'm not sure that will be particularly reassuring to backbench Labour MPs this morning.
It's worth putting in context just who Jenny Chapman is. She's been tied to the hip with Keir Starmer since they served in Jeremy Corbyn's shadow ministerial team together. Keir Starmer was shadow Brexit secretary, she was shadow Brexit minister. And in fact, they travelled the country together, ostensibly to explain Labour's Brexit policy then to local Labour parties. This was later seen to be sort of the beginnings of Keir Starmer's leadership campaign, having those rubber chicken dinners with local Labour parties throughout 2018, 2019, meant that when the time came for a leadership election, he was in pole position to become party leader. That was in no small part down to Jenny Chapman, who actually lost her seat of Darlington in the 2019 general election, and then was put in the House of Lords by Sir Keir Starmer after that. She was a key element of why he became leader in the first place. So no doubt that is one of the key reasons why she is one of the faces of the sort of rearguard action to try and keep him in his position as Labour Party leader today. It's interesting looking at those who have come out to defend the Prime Minister, the loyalists who are the closest people to him. But perhaps what's also worth looking at is those who have said nothing at all. Those cabinet ministers who remain silent, who are thinking over their options, who are perhaps thinking about when to move, that is perhaps more indicative of where this whole thing is going to go than those who have always stood by Sir Keir Starmer, than his closest allies in Parliament, and what they're telling the media publicly. It might be worth thinking about what those who aren't speaking are thinking about privately.
Right, that's Tom Harwood at Westminster. We've still got our august panel with us. Piers Botticher, it just feels like we're back in the bad old days of the Tories imploding.
Well, it does.
And a Prime Minister clinging
in many
on
ways,
against
yes.
all the odds.
Yeah, I mean, it's the sad state of affairs of politics in this country at the moment. But I do think Kevin's point about streeting is very apposite, because, quite frankly, although he hasn't said he's going to stand against him, he's been on manoeuvres so publicly. He's so much the person. If he doesn't stand now, he may miss his opportunity forever, like David Miliband missed his opportunity. And actually, I'd much rather have David Miliband than Ed Miliband anywhere near us.
Yeah.
David Miliband was an intelligent man, and who I think is a pretty sensible man. And even speaking as non-Labour, I would have to say I would much prefer David Miliband as Prime Minister.
They picked the wrong Miliband. I always thought that at the time.
Yeah, of any Labourite, David Miliband would be my #1 choice. But I do think streeting, if he's got the cojones to do it, he should do it today. He should stand up, be counted, give it. Otherwise, he'll always be the man who never made it.
Maybe he knows he hasn't got the 81 names.
Maybe he does.
But Piers, this goes back to my earlier point, which is that we're talking about personalities, and absolutely there are some Labour MPs, cabinet ministers, that would be more attractive leaders than Keir Starmer. They have more charisma, they're better at communicating, they're more natural and authentic, absolutely. But that doesn't change the fact that nobody knows anymore what the Labour Party stands for, who the Labour Party stands for, what kind of policies they would want to implement if they had the chance. Everything they've tried, they have reversed because they can't get the majority in Parliament. And I just don't see that changing with any potential leader that they have at the moment.
But that's not the case on two levels, Miriam. One is you'll see a programme tomorrow, whether you like it or not, in the state opening of Parliament, the King's speech. And the second thing is they have some achievements, they get no credit for them, whether it is the higher minimum wage, the Renters' Rights Act, greater security for tenants, whether it is new job rights, whether it is childcare, whether it is breakfast clubs. These are all achievements I think they can point to, and they can hail
in terms of where we are.
They make a difference to a lot of people's lives.
Well,
but people are not.
Well, then why are so many Labour MPs demanding he goes?
Because a lot of people just don't feel that change yet, because they've had a terrible squeeze in living standards and wages, and then secondly, the public has taken against Keir Starmer, the front man, the Prime Minister, the main person, and so they're not listening to Labour. And the reason, the 80, 81, whatever it is now, have come forward is they hear on the doorsteps, they hear in pubs, they hear in cafes, they hear it in supermarkets when they go to do their shopping, that people say, I don't like that Keir Starmer.
But Kevin, you don't like that Keir Starmer.
No, I don't. No, at the
beginning.
No, at the beginning, I said they should have gone for Lisa Nandy, who's now the Culture Secretary, going back to that leadership contest in 2020. Now, I've always seen his failings. He's proved to be less competent than I thought he would be. The one thing I thought he would do would be unexciting and run a pretty boring ship. He and Rishi Sunak had more in common in their styles than either would ever care to admit. But politically, he's got it completely wrong, going back to the winter fuel allowance, which politics is essentially whose side are you on? Who do people feel you're representing? And when you're taking winter fuel allowance away from 10, 11 million pensioners who are on very small occupational pensions, you're taking it away from a billionaire. That's one thing. You won't save very much money, though, but you're taking it away, £200 or so, from people on small amounts of money. You turn later, but you don't get any credit for it, because you've already upset people.
Yeah, it was insanity, and it showed immediately that Starmer had no political judgment.
Yeah.
Because if you had any judgment, you'd say, hang on a minute, we can't take that away from pensioners, because that would be disastrous. I mean, what he is he's a lawyer, and he's obsessed with the law, international law. He spends his life trying to be seen as an international statesman, which he's not. He's a laughingstock. He hides behind international law on everything, like the Chagos, like immigration. He put his former buddy in Chambers, the dreadful Hermer, in as Attorney General, a man who's made his fortune representing enemies of this country. I mean, he's made U-turn after U-turn. He's got no political judgment. He has a shocking cabinet full of terrible people with no experience of anything, and yet he still thinks he can cling on as leader. Sorry, mate, it's over.
Well, let's go back to where it's all happening. GBNews political correspondent Catherine Forster is outside Downing Street. Catherine, you've seen a succession of cabinet ministers leave this morning. Which do you think had the greatest spring in their step?
Well, the ones that came to talk to us were all very optimistic, positive about the PM. We just spoke to Baroness Chapman, as you saw a few minutes ago. She is an uber Starmer loyalist, and she said, look, we're getting on with working out how to deliver for people what they need. And I said, you said you'd stop the chaos, and she said, we will stop the chaos. We will stop the chaos. So that's from a member of the cabinet this lunchtime, although it feels very much like the chaos is very much already here. Clearly she, and there are others in the cabinet too, feel that this is not the time to change leader, not least because Westminster is getting ready for the King's speech tomorrow to lay out the government's legislative agenda for the next term, but I think what happens in the coming hours could be critical. Wes Streeting, who's normally pretty happy to talk to the media, very, very tight-lipped, walked away, giving nothing away. I think a lot depends now on what he does next, because he has told the Prime Minister in the past that he won't move against him first, but if it's clear that the PM's position is untenable, then he will challenge for the leadership, and he says he's got the numbers. This is likely the best chance that the Health Secretary has to get the job that he's always wanted, while Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, the favourite among many, seen as the best option because he's the only person that polls better with the public, the general public, the voting public, in terms of being a leader, while he is out of the picture and doesn't have a seat. But if Wes Streeting moves, he won't move alone. There's no way that those on the left of the party will allow that. So then we might see Angela Rayner. Well, the HMRC are still investigating her over her tax. She said yesterday that it was a mistake not to let Andy Burnham stand in Gorton and Denton. We might get Ed Miliband again. He has said to the Prime Minister in the past that the Prime Minister should set out a timetable to go. He apparently doesn't want the top job. But again, these are people who are not just going to sit aside and let Wes Streeting waltz into Downing Street. But of course, we are getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, because currently the Prime Minister is still adamant that he is going nowhere.
How long for, Andrew?
I've said all along he's going to brazen it out. I've thought all along that he'll still be probably clinging on up until the Labour Party conference, when the tribe gathers, the trade unionists, the party members, MPs, and it's in Liverpool this year, and that will be fascinating.
Well, Catherine Forster, thank you very much. Now, in studio, we are joined by Michael Ellis, former Attorney General and constitutional expert. Michael, there are so many angles to this story. Hello, not least the parallels with many of the weeks and months that we lived through in the last government. But I'd love to get your view on the constitutional impact of this leadership crisis the day before a King's speech.
Well, first of all, Andrew and Miriam, I thought that Keir Starmer said no more psychodramas.
Yes, he did.
And here we are today. But look, where we are constitutionally is quite interesting. People have wondered about what happens tomorrow if Keir Starmer was to go. Now, it doesn't look like Keir Starmer is going to go. That's sort of clear at the moment. And I think that they're corralling loyal cabinet ministers to come out and speak to the camera crews in Downing Street. He intends to stay. But we haven't had a postponement of a state opening of Parliament at this short notice. Well, I can't find an example in the last 100 years.
Right.
We had a postponement in 1980 and again in 1976. There was one in 1945 and another one in 1924. But those 4 examples that go back to World War I were weeks in advance, 3 or 4 weeks in advance. So they weren't the day before.
Yeah.
And I can tell you now that there are about 1,000 military personnel and about 200 horses waiting to do their stuff tomorrow. So I think that the state opening will go ahead. There is actually, for those interested in the arcane process, there is a way of adjourning at this late notice, and what you do is both houses assemble as if they're going to hear the King, and the Lords Commissioners tell them to go away again. But that hasn't happened, well, for probably several hundred years.
OK.
So I don't think it's going to happen tomorrow. But there's an interesting little bit that you may recall from previous state openings when the late Queen or the King gave the speech. They always said at the end, "My Lords and members of the House of Commons, other matters will be laid before you." And that's a catch-all, because what it means is that the Prime Minister of the day can add new things that the Sovereign hasn't mentioned. It does mean that if there was a change of leader during the next session, the next parliamentary session, they can lay other matters that the King doesn't mention tomorrow.
Could there be... so, hypothesise, we have the King's speech tomorrow, Starmer falls, whether it's in the next few weeks or September. Can we have another King's speech this year?
Well, there's technically nothing to stop it, but I don't think that would be necessary or likely. I think that what would happen is that if the new Prime Minister didn't want to run up with certain things that are mentioned tomorrow that Keir Starmer wanted to go with, then they simply wouldn't bring them before the Houses. And if they wanted to put new measures before the Houses, they would consider it having been included in that catch-all phrase, other matters will be laid before you. So constitutionally, I think, you know, the good old British Constitution, several centuries old, actually has backup processes for everything. So constitutionally and both practically in terms of the military personnel, you know, and the military horses and the road closures and the availability of all the key figures, that obviously would be extremely disruptive. But I don't think we're going to see the Lords Commissioners tomorrow say, thank you all for coming, off you go. I don't think that's likely to happen.
I imagine we never know what the King thinks about politics because he never tells us, and the audience with the Prime Minister always remains private. It's a very important part of the Constitution. You can't think anything else, though, that he'd be other than displeased with this chaos.
Well, of course, you know, I think that...
I mean, it's making the country an international laughingstock, in my view.
Well, we are changing our Prime Ministers with frighteningly frequency. And we have to really look, I think, don't we, Andrew and Miriam, about why it is that Prime Ministers don't seem to be able to survive more than 2 years. That there is something... Is it the quality? Is it the pressure that they're under? The system isn't working as it should? You know,
is it social media?
It's a number of different things, probably, but it obviously isn't a good thing for the markets. If you look at the markets, they're not happy about what's going on at the moment, and they'll be even more unhappy if there's more unscheduled change. So it's not good for the country's image, it's not good for our international reputation, it's not good for the economy or the international markets or the London markets. So all in all, it is a psychodrama that Keir Starmer and Labour said they were going to avoid.
Do you think that the bond markets have become a straitjacket around our politics? Because, of course, Andy Burnham famously said a few months ago that we should ignore them, and that sounds all very nice until you realise that we're so indebted, we're owned by foreign debt, that we have to pay attention.
I think Andy Burnham was being a bit naive there. Even in Margaret Thatcher's day, she said you can't buck the markets, didn't she, Andrew? She did. And the point is that they actually want to be led, the markets. They want to have security and surety. They want to know what's going on. I don't think the markets... There isn't a force that wants to lead the country from the markets, but they want to have proper leadership, and they want to have, you know, security of knowledge about what's happening next. Uncertainty is the biggest disheveler
but if
of
we
our
were
markets.
in less debt, if we were less indebted, we could be more politically bold. So, for example, going back to the Liz Truss analogy that's been raised several times today, actually, what got Liz Truss into hot water was not the tax cut for bankers. It was the huge amount of borrowing that she wants to engage in to help people with energy prices at the time of the Ukraine war. But she couldn't do that, even if she thought it was politically correct, because we're in so much debt.
You make a very good point. And not only are we in huge debt, I think the bigger problem, because other Western countries are also in a huge debt and they don't have the inflexibility. What we have tended to do with successive governments is lock down certain percentages of our GDP to spend on certain things. That means that there's less and less flexibility about being able to do things. So if you have legislation which binds you to spending X% on defence, X% on welfare, X% on other things, you restrict yourself, and actually any Chancellor of the Exchequer has an increasingly small amount of budget that they can play with. And that gives an inflexibility that makes it very difficult to do bold things. But I think the main reason, we haven't had political leaders that are prepared to do bold things. And Keir Starmer's speech yesterday, where he was going to reset everything, I mean, it was literally embarrassing, because it was the same old thing. There was nothing bold about it at all. It was as though he were talking to a Labour Party, group, and not to the general public. And this inability to function outside of the political bubble is incredibly damaging.
I watched it with amazement, the speech, because I thought, you don't get it. If that's the best you've got, that is not going to save your premiership.
The truth is, he has the political nous of a broom handle. I mean, there is absolutely no political...
broom handle.
There's no political antennae there at all. And it's not a left or right thing. You have to understand where people are thinking and how they operate.
No instincts.
Taking your jacket and tie off and making a speech to Labour friends is not going to change the weather when the situation is a full crisis as it is now.
I thought you probably spent more time fussing about should I put a tie on or a jacket than he did about the speech, because the speech was woeful. I'd heard most of it before.
Well, Henry Hill writes in the Critic today, what does the Prime Minister think is going on around him?
Well, this is it. This is it. But if you're surrounded by policy wonks who are telling you largely what you want to hear, then I'm afraid you're not really going to... You're not going to be able to come up with anything new.
Well, Michael Ellis, don't go anywhere. We will be coming back to you. But we've now got down the line Jason Cowley, who's the former editor of the News Statement. Jason, thank you so much for joining us. Now, you wrote a fascinating piece yesterday in The Times talking about the various factions within Labour and what awaits the party should they go down this route of changing leader. Can you explain a little bit more what you said in that piece?
Yeah, it was my column for the Sunday Times. What I was saying, because it was on immediate response to those absolutely appalling election results right across these islands. I mean, Labour were beaten everywhere, losing to everyone. And what I said was that Starmer's authority is shattered, not only in the parliamentary party, but in the country at large. And if he continues, and the guy's in deep trouble this morning, if he continues, he will only continue as a kind of puppet of the soft left faction of the Parliamentary Labour Party. If you remember, Miriam, his great mantra was country before party. That was the slogan on which he ran. And very quickly it became party before country. And now it's his own survival before anything else.
Jason, he's brazening it out, if that's the right expression, currently. But how long can he brazen it out for?
It's looking very bad for him, Andrew. You're absolutely right. He's learning a few lessons from Jeremy Corbyn in 2016 when they tried to topple him after the Brexit referendum. And he said, look, I may have lost the complete confidence of the parliamentary party, and Starmer hasn't lost that yet. I'm going to tough it out and take on Owen Smith, the average challenger, and he won convincingly. Starmer has none of the popularity that Corbyn has in the country among the members of the Labour Party. But, what is he? He's a resilient fellow, he's a determined fellow, and he believes he has a mandate. He ran a commanding general election victory only in 2024, and he believes that is his mandate to continue. I think he's deluded about that, but nevertheless, that's what he believes.
But Jason, even if Starmer were to step down or be removed and replaced with somebody more charismatic, more popular, would that actually make any difference to the Labour Party's long-term prospects? We can see, for example, with the Conservative Party, Kemi Badenoch has personally very good poll ratings, and yet her party is still stuck on 19, 20% in the polls. It's made no difference at all. Could a change of leader actually give Labour back that popularity that they've lost?
It's a very good question, Miriam, and I explored it in my Sunday Times column. I think what we're seeing in this country, but also across Europe, is the decline of the old centre-left and centre-right parties. It's a trend not just here, but everywhere. Germany, the Netherlands, Scandinavia, and France, and so on. Everywhere we look, the centre-right and centre-left are not necessarily losing, but they're losing vote share and they're struggling for relevance. And this is a huge problem. I think the Labour Party was very much a party of the 20th century. You know, what was it originally? It was a combination of the Labour interest, organised Labour, and what you might, George Orwell used to call the kind of book-trained socialist, you know, the Fabian socialist, the intellectuals. It was a coalition that just about held. Labour didn't win many general elections, but they won some, and they had some significant leaders, Clement Attlee, Harold Wilson, Tony Blair and others. Keir Starmer isn't one of them, but that era has gone, and I think the party no longer knows what it is and for whom it speaks. It claims to be the party of the working class. Well, look what happened in the working class heartlands, in the South Wales valleys, in the Red Wall seats in the north of England. Labour were absolutely defeated and rejected. By whom? Reform UK.
And the King of the North, Andy Burnham, Jason, he's apparently on a train to London. We don't know what that's about. With your perception of the Labour Party and the current political climate, do you think there is a safe seat that can be made available for Andy Burnham that he can win and then challenge Starmer for the leadership? Does that safe seat exist anymore?
It's extremely difficult. I guess there will be safe seats in Liverpool. And there may be safe seats in Manchester. I don't know. I mean, things are so volatile and changing. Burnham was once at Westminster. He's now coming from outside Westminster. You know, he was seen as a little bit of a lightweight when he was at Westminster. You know, well-meaning, but didn't have the substance. But he's gone away. You know, he's Mayor of Greater Manchester. He's been perceived to be successful, and he's actually quite popular in Manchester, and he's actually a very good communicator. And in their desperation, they are seeking perhaps a candidate who's not in the present Westminster setup, and he may be that candidate. But indeed, Andrew, if he's able to get through the mechanism of the party, you know, very complicated, the National Executive Committee, which is the kind of rule-making body of the party, which blocked him when he tried to stand in the Gorton and Denton by-election. If he's able to get through the NEC and then find a seat, someone maybe retires and gives up their seat for him, there's no guarantee he will win it, Andrew. You're absolutely right. And that by-election, what an amazing event that will be. It will be an absolute media circus. Gorton and Denton was already, where Matt Goodwin ran for reform, and we saw what happened with the Greens ultimately won. I mean, just imagine what might happen if Burnham has a seat and there's a by-election. Great for us in the media.
And fortune favours the brave as well, Jason, doesn't it? Isn't that the expression? So why doesn't Wed Streeting, if he's got the numbers, and I've read 100 times that he's got the numbers, why doesn't he run now? Because no Burnham, Angela Rayner is wounded over her tax affairs. It would be a shoo-in, wouldn't it?
He's very much asking, well, if he was to declare, he would be challenged from the soft left of the party. They wouldn't allow it to be a coronation. So a candidate would emerge. You know, would it be Angela Rayner? Would it be Ed Miliband, you know, previous leader of the party? So I don't think Wed Streeting will just be handed it. He's asking himself that very question. He said, I don't want to be the first mover against Keir Starmer, although in many ways he and his allies or his outriders have been plotting and scheming for some time for this moment. And you're absolutely right. Fortune does favour the brave. You know, sometimes in politics you don't choose the moment chooses you.
Jason Cowley,
really
thank you so much for joining us this morning. Jason Cowley, former editor of the New Statesman. Really interesting analysis there.
Yeah, and we've got Mike Elliswood. You saw them close up in the Commons, as did you, Miriam.
Thank you.
I mean, who do you think is the most impressive potential candidate?
Well, I agree with what Jason was saying about Andy Burnham being considered quite a lightweight when he was in...
And he flip-flopped in the leadership campaign, which is why he lost votes.
He did. And he was, gave the distinct impression of being a nice person, but he was actually considered quite a lightweight. So it's very interesting. Wes Streeting, I think, is pretty desperate to get his move in right now because he knows that it's his best chance because of the lack of the availability of other candidates. But he also has major enemies. I mean, the Labour Party is incredibly fractured and fractious, and usually they keep that below the surface, but there are those who will move very quickly against Wes Streeting. I dare say, I'll make a prediction, whoever replaces Keir Starmer will not last the full 3 years left of this Parliament. I don't think so.
So that really would be the Tory psychodrama all over again?
Well, I mean, I think they won't last the full 3 years.
Well, then there'd have to be a general election.
Well,
let's bring in our Deputy Political Editor, Tom Harwood. Tom, I don't know if you can hear in the studio, but Michael Ellis is predicting that a replacement for Keir Starmer will not last the rest of the parliamentary term. What do you make of that?
It's entirely possible that the same carousel of prime ministers that we've seen for the last 6 or 7 years continues to roll on. That a new person comes in, promises the world, promises that somehow they can get the country out of the bind that it's in, promises the unicorn politics that somehow we can have low taxes, very high public spending, and we don't need to worry about the debt interest costs of this country, which are currently over £100 billion a year, just servicing the mountain of debt that we have. We could have another politician come in pretending that the debt's not a problem, pretending that they can promise all things to all people and it doesn't have to cost a penny on tax, and that only the very super rich would have to pay and that everyone can get on normally. You could, of course, have a politician coming in incredibly popularly, promising all that, and then within a few weeks realising that politics doesn't work that way, that we are reliant on the generosity of international creditors to be able to run the country, that we have such an enormous deficit as a country and such an enormous mountain of debt that actually the freedom of movement for any Prime Minister is limited by those international creditors. And this is the problem for a country that has quite as much debt as Britain, for a country that has lost as much respect as Britain in many ways on the world stage, that we are, to use a phrase from Andy Burnham, in hock to the bond markets. That if the government does things that the bond markets don't like, well, the bond markets have the government by the proverbial. And that is a problem. That is a problem that has weighed down not just this Prime Minister and this Chancellor, but the one before that, and the one before that too. And crucially, unless there is a politician who comes forward and says what the country frankly needs to hear, that it's going to be difficult to get out of this rut, that there are going to have to be big and bad decisions that are going to have to be taken to get us onto a more stable footing, well, we're going to see this game play out again and again and again. A politician comes forward, promises the world, gets into power, and it turns out that they simply can't deliver it. I could imagine a new Labour leader become Prime Minister on a huge wave of popularity, thinking that they have solved everything. The country loves them, and loves them for the first few weeks, until it comes to that first budget, where actually they're faced with the economic reality that we face as a country. That then could be a perilous position for any politician who wants to promise the unachievable.
Thanks, Tom.
I'm not sure I agree with the first part of your analysis. I'm not sure we are going to see anyone swept to power on a wave of popularity. Again, the prevailing mood seems to be, we've tried everyone else, we'll give you a chance, but with no great hope that anything will change.
Entirely possible, but if we look at certain polls, there are individuals who are seen to be much more popular than the current Prime Minister. I think it's not beyond the realm of imagination that a new Prime Minister could come in on positive numbers, or at least very low negative numbers, certainly far more popular than the -40, -50 that we see this current Prime Minister languishing at. But again, just how quickly that all disintegrates, I think, might surprise many in the Labour Party.
All right, that's Tom Harwood. Thanks so much. Now, of course, a big announcement from the Prime Minister this week was the nationalisation of British Steel, subject to a public interest test, whatever that means. John Harrison is from UK Steel. Morning.
Good morning.
What does it mean?
So this is an important step. It means certainty for British Steel and its workforce. It means ultimately the government will now own the company and can direct it, and also hopefully get some co-investment in at some point as well.
Just how much does it cost?
We don't know yet.
Right.
So there's been
because the government hasn't got any money.
Well, there's been negotiations going on with GBNews, who are the current owners.
Yeah.
We don't know yet how those negotiations have gone, but we'll need to see the detail of the legislation before we know how much this might cost.
Are we talking billions?
I do not know. It could be millions, it could be billions, but we don't know this. But critically, if we don't support British Steel, we lose our sovereign capability to make steel from scratch in this country. We'd be the only G20 country in the world not to have that primary steel-making capacity. So it's a vital thing the government is doing at the moment.
Of course, last April, the government stepped in to take hold of GBNews with emergency powers. Parliament was recalled, I remember. And since then, the government's been propping up British Steel. I think £1.2 million a day they're saying it costs. Do you think then that actually the intention here is to save the blast furnace, that despite what Ed Miliband might want and that net zero fanatics might want, they are determined to keep that primary steelmaking capacity?
Well, the blast furnaces at British Steel are getting on in years at the moment. They can't go on indefinitely. The plan previously was to replace those with EAF furnaces at some point with co-private investment. What UK Steel has said is they should keep those furnaces running until the new EAFs at some point come online. Because, again, if those blast furnaces go off overnight tonight, we lose the capacity to make rail, structural steel and other types of steel. So for the moment, they should keep...
But although there are many advantages to the electric arc furnaces, the one thing they can't do is produce virgin steel from iron ore. Isn't that a necessary sovereign capability that we retain at least one blast furnace in this country? And we've lost Port Talbot, of course.
It's a bit of a myth that you can't make all types of steel in an electric arc furnace. If you have the right amount of raw ingredients in an arc furnace, you can make pretty much any type of steel. And unlike blast furnaces that require imported iron ore, we have a surplus of scrap metal in this country. So actually it makes us more sovereign capable than the old blast furnaces do.
If the government had stepped in sooner, Nigel Farage was talking about nationalising British Steel last April. If they'd stepped in sooner, could Port Talbot have been saved?
They're completely different issues. Port Talbot was a commercial deal with the previous government for co-investment in their furnaces there. It's totally removed from what's happening at British Steel. That deal had been kind of solved and signed already. This is a very different issue.
How many jobs are at stake?
Goodness me, at British Steel itself, there are a few thousand, but in the wider supply chain that British Steel supports, it's tens of thousands. So it's not just British Steel itself, it's the wider supply chain and their customers.
And I imagine, being political here, some of those jobs are in Labour-held constituencies.
You may say that. I couldn't possibly comment. But Scunthorpe is a steel-making town, you know, as are lots of places around the country. They are voters. I'm sure that is possibly a consideration. But fundamentally, this is about our national sovereign capability to make that steel from scratch.
Of course, one of the challenges for the British steel industry over recent years has been government energy policy, not just this government, of course, but successive governments trying to transition our energy supply from fossil fuels to electricity. But all the taxes that have gone into that, all the different tariffs, have made it extraordinarily difficult for high-energy industries like steel to operate. Do you think now that the government is paying the cost of energy for British Steel, they might start to wake up?
Well, energy is one of the few issues in the steel strategy the government didn't directly tackle. You know, as you say, we are paying, I think, the highest energy prices in the developed world, especially industry, much higher than France, much higher than Germany and most of our close competitors. It's critical if British Steel and the wider steel sector are going to be viable in the long term to get those energy prices down, and we are telling the government that quite firmly.
And is Ed Miliband listening? The Net Zero Secretary?
Well, we're having some great conversations with the government. They've already done some things. We've had support for network charges. The supercharger has gone to 90% for the cost of energy. We're having ongoing conversations with all different branches of government about how the government can go further.
Right. Fascinating.
John Harrison, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Really interesting.
Well, whoever takes over or doesn't from Keir Starmer, I think the steel industry is such an important
big issue, and politically after what happened in the local elections last week, where Labour were wiped out in some of its traditional seats. Big problem. Let's go to Catherine Forster, who's in Downing Street. Any more where it's been extraordinary comings and goings, Catherine? We're all still waiting to hear if Wes Streeting's got anything to say. He was unusually tight-lipped when he left Number 10 this morning.
He was. He's normally a great one for talking to the media, but he was very, very quiet. In fact, I think we've got a clip of him ignoring all of us. Let's have a look at that now.
West Riding, do you want to be Prime Minister? Will you challenge Keir Starmer? West Riding, do you want the job or not?
That's our very own Keith Bayes that you can hear with that voice booming out. He is becoming the legend of Downing Street, doing those shouts. But yes, West Streeting strangely silent, or perhaps not strangely silent, because I think so much hinges now on what West Streeting does or does not do next, because it looks like the Cabinet, nobody directly told the Prime Minister that the time was up. The Prime Minister's office brief note saying that he was going nowhere, that he'd been elected to bring change and improve people's lives, and that was what he was going to do. And then a succession of cabinet ministers came out and made supportive noises. Peter Kyle, the business secretary, Liz Kendall, the science secretary, Baroness Chapman, an uber loyalist of the Prime Minister, spoke to me and said, look, the Prime Minister's getting on with the job of running the country, making people's lives better. When I said what happened to stopping the chaos, referring of course to what they said before the last election about the Tories, she said, we will stop the chaos. Watch this space on that. But also we've had a couple of tweets from cabinet ministers. Steve Reid, the housing secretary, has retweeted Paul Johnson, who used to head up the Institute for Fiscal Studies, and he had been saying that Starmer and Reeves are not kidding when they say this political uncertainty causes economic damage. The only reset being achieved at the moment is higher borrowing costs. Result, we're all worse off. Now, Steve Reid has retweeted that, and he said, this is not a game. This instability has consequences for people's lives. The people who will be hurt most will be those who elected us less than 2 years ago. We must unite behind the Prime Minister. And a similar message now coming from the Defence Secretary, John Healey. He has posted on X and he has said, people are worried about current conflicts and looming global crises. They expect their government to lead the country through, as the Prime Minister is doing. More instability is not in Britain's interest. Our full focus must now be on dealing with immediate economic and security challenges. And of course, we know the world is very dangerous. There's a war in Europe. There's this conflict in the Middle East. The Strait of Hormuz is closed. Even if it reopened tomorrow, and there's no prospect of that, our bills are going up, and the knock-on effects of that are going to get substantially worse. So the argument of many is this is not the time to unseat a Prime Minister. Talking to people in Number 10, they said that the mood is very sad, and there are plenty of people horrified at what's going on. But I think now it feels like the Prime Minister, and I'm reluctant to say this because it could change in 2 minutes, has been given a bit of a reprieve, possibly till after the King's speech, which of course is tomorrow. That could change, however, if the quiet man, Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, decides to make his move. This is probably his best chance that he's ever going to get, because if Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Manchester, gets back into Parliament, he is the favourite among many MPs and indeed quite a few cabinet ministers too. We will see what happens.
Could be seen to be quite a clever move by the Prime Minister, because in refusing to stand down, to resign voluntarily, he is forcing his rivals to put their money where their mouth is, to go through the proper processes of standing, of exposing themselves as challengers, rather than having dinners in the back rooms of Westminster and trying to get people to resign. Perhaps this is one of his best strategic moves.
Well, it may well be, and we know that, you know, he fought to get to where he is, and we know too that, yes, 81, well, more than 81 MPs have publicly said he should go, but they are not united behind a single challenger. And Wes Streeting's allies told me this morning in no uncertain terms that Wes Streeting will not seek to unseat the Prime Minister unless it is clear that the Prime Minister is going to have to go. At the moment, it's not quite clear that he's going to have to go, or not that he's going to have to go right now. So is Wes Streeting really going to move? Because if he does, there's plenty of people in the Labour Party that frankly cannot stand him, and if he moves, others will move too, and given the chances that they will move, they will ultimately put in somebody to the left of the party, Wes Streeting could move and end up not getting the job anyway.
Well, Catherine Forster outside Downing Street, where it's all happening, or not happening now.
Yeah, exactly. We've still got Michael Ellis just for a minute or two. Michael, they're piling in, aren't they, Cabinet, to try and make it very difficult for somebody like Streeting to challenge. They're saying, look at the markets, look at the chaos. And maybe he hasn't got the 81 names anyway.
Possibly, but I think the ball very much now is in Streeting's court.
Yeah.
It's really down to him as to whether he makes his move or not. And some would say that if he doesn't make that move, then does he have the resolute nature to be Prime Minister and to be leader of the Labour Party? Because now's his moment. You can see from the maths that he would not be challenged by Burnham because Burnham isn't available, or by Angela Rayner because she isn't available for tax reasons. So it's now or never, probably, for Wes Streeting. Is he going to make his move? I have to say that Kemi Badenoch has been doing really well in bringing the Prime Minister to this position. The reason why he's under this pressure from his own parliamentary Labour Party is partly because of things like the humble address, that was an incredibly successful move, and of course she was very effective previously with this
on
the Mandelson matter, but also on the grooming gangs issues. One thing I think could happen, I have no information about this, but one thing that is a possibility. In 1892, after the Queen Victoria's speech from the throne, the then opposition laid an amendment to the Queen's speech that they had no confidence in the government of the day. You can lay an amendment on the Queen's speech. If the government of the day does not win the Queen's speech debate, by custom and convention, the collapses.
But with a majority of...
But the Turkeys would have to vote for Christmas for that to happen.
Yeah, extraordinary.
But technically, it's a possibility, and it would put people under pressure.
We've just heard that Andy Burnham has been spotted at Euston Station. What's he coming down to embrace?
Well,
he might be going shopping.
You've given us a 19th century analogy. What about a 16th century one? This is like Mary I riding to London when she hears that her brother has given the throne to some random cousin, and she wants for herself.
Yes.
Well, this is where we are right now, because we're, if we're talking about possible postponements of the state opening of Parliament at a few hours' notice, that hasn't happened for centuries. It certainly hasn't happened in the last 100 years. So every time we've had adjournments, it's been several weeks, 3 or 4 weeks' notice. I think what's going to happen here, though, is the pressure on Keir Starmer is zombie.
Yeah.
He is going to be the zombie Prime Minister. He'll be standing there as a zombie leader. Yeah. That's his difficulty.
And everybody knows it.
And stay or go, he won't be able to get anything through Parliament. Well, thank you,
Michael Ellis. Always a joy to talk to you.
Well,
that's it from us on this memorable day. I think I was put right. I said he's going to brazen it out and cling on.
What about tomorrow?
He'll still be there, and it'll be the King's speech, which will be a very difficult King's speech. And look at the King's furrowed brow when he makes that speech tomorrow, because it will be furrowed.
He's not going to enjoy it.
No.
Well, up next is Good Afternoon Britain with Mark and Nana, but the latest is that 85 MPs now want the Prime Minister to go, and GB News' Deputy Political Editor Tom Harwood has all the latest on this huge day in politics.
Westminster stands in the eye of the storm. You'll see behind me that the Green stands quiet. The fences have been erected for tomorrow's King's speech. And yet, all around, the sense of swirling chaos, the sense of danger for the Prime Minister. Quiet now, but a wave of disruption throughout yesterday and into this morning. Resignations from parliamentary private secretaries and one minister. More than 80 members of Parliament calling for the Prime Minister to go. And now this curious waiting and watching. Waiting to see what happens from the principal players in this drama. Could a putative leadership candidate take this afternoon as the moment to challenge the Prime Minister formally, as the moment to declare the start of a formal leadership election? Or Might they wait until after the King's speech tomorrow? This is the question that grips Westminster as the drama continues to unfold. For his part, the Prime Minister has effectively said, put up or shut up. He's putting a brave face on the fact that more than a quarter of his parliamentary party have put their heads above the parapet and said it's time for the Prime Minister to go. This is a daring moment for those who have called on the Prime Minister to leave, and a dangerous moment for a Prime Minister not yet 2 years in the job. Of course, he's presided over more than a dozen U-turns. He's presided on 2 disastrous sets of local elections. In many polls, the Labour Party now sits in 4th place, and the question becomes, just how much more can the Labour rank and file take? Just how much more can Labour politicians stand up to as this disastrous situation, in the polls at least, continues to go